Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is story about what if Naruto and Sasuke have each other in a second chance as they attempt to try again. Part 1. Before I start, please do support for more amazing content and comments for part 2. Do consider to subscribe my channel and share my video to your friends and check out the description as well. Let's start the video. He ignored the sounds of battle inside the village as Sasuke stood before him breathing hard. His Chikuto had long ago broken under several Raisengans. Naruto himself was no better off. Weaponless and wounded, he was breathing hard as he leveled a glare at his best friend who up until that day hadn't stepped foot to these gates of Konoha for over 3 years. It had been an unwanted nightmare when news from the patrols had come that Sasuke was heading toward the village. Reality approached when he stood in front of the village gates. He wasn't alone. Behind him was his Team Hawk, which consisted of the Water Freak, the originator of the Cursed Seal, the Fangirl, and the notorious Madara. They walked behind him, and as he approached he didn't even bother to hide his presence. His arrogance was something else. When Naruto had confronted him at the village gates, he had brushed past him like he was nothing. There was no acknowledgement at all, no words and barely a glance. That was the real kicker. He could never stand to be ignored, and by Sasuke especially, who was the one person that he constantly sought acknowledgement from. Several heated words from Naruto had the cold boy turning around, followed by some callous responses from Sasuke. He questioned, demanded answers as to why Sasuke was doing this. Sasuke told him once to step aside. He wasn't the one he wanted to kill. There were no more words after that. The fight was on and neither of them was going to back down. Sasuke didn't care why Naruto was standing in his way. It didn't matter. He just needed to knock the blonde out of his way like he had done so many times before. Naruto didn't understand why Sasuke was going against him, and he only cared too much. He supposed he never did understand Sasuke's need for vengeance. It didn't matter. He just needed to knock some sense into that thick skull of his like he's been trying to do so many times before. After watching each other and catching their own breaths, they started gathering their chakra for their trademark jutsus. Naruto could have been something more if only there hadn't been larger-than-life Itachi standing in the way, taunting him. Sasuke may have been his best friend, but this was his village. This was the village he swore to protect no matter what. He growled these words out to the other boy. They charged each other and clashed, staring eye to eye as each boy's jutsu threatened to outdo the other. For a moment Sasuke stared at him, a nostalgic look on his face, so similar to his brother that for a second all he could see was Itachi bloody and wounded as he lifted up a finger to flick his forehead for the last time. Naruto didn't see anything, much less the softening of Sasuke's face as the light was blinding, but that wasn't as blinding as the memory that assaulted him. Deja vu deafened him, and the pain of being pushed away constantly made him hesitate. In the most critical moment, he faltered. Pain shot through his chest, and he knew no more. The explosion threw them apart, but even still, Sasuke felt his hand plunge into soft flesh and organ before the white light became nothing more than pitch-black darkness. A cry ripped through the gates as the light dimmed and revealed the two bodies lying on either side of the destroyed area. Tears fell from Jade's eyes as she found herself too late, and useless once more despite the training she had gone through. She took a halting step forward but gasped when the bodies started to dissipate like ashes in the wind. As the bodies faded, she took another step forward only to find that she was vanishing as well. Another frantic look around her showed that the world itself was dissolving. Sasuke, wake up, it's time to get up. You'll miss your brother's departure if you don't get up, a female voice spoke quietly but firmly. The words of his brother's departure jarred a memory of a dying Itachi, and he opened his eyes immediately only to groan and shut them. A gentle chuckle came from the woman again as she apologized for opening the blinds. I thought you would already be up, she explained before tugging the blanket off of him and walking away. Not before leaving some parting words though. He's waiting for you downstairs. At that Sasuke slowly opened his eyes again. He caught sight of the woman closing the door, and he almost did a double take. Mom? He croaked out. She paused and raised a patient brow. Yes, Sasuke? He drew a blank. What the hell was going on? Where the hell was he? Too busy trying to remember what happened, he missed the frown on her face as she came back into the room. Are you alright, honey? She asked as she sat down on his bed and reached for his forehead. He jerked back reflexively and automatically tried to jump off the bed and onto the floor for better footing. His foot caught the blanket that she had pulled off of him and placed at the foot of the bed. His legs felt funny as he tried to catch his fall by taking a step only to find the ground much farther away from the bed than he expected. Again he tried to catch himself, this time with his hands, but encountered the same problem as his feet. He landed in an ungraceful pile on the floor with the blanket wrapped around one foot. Sasuke, are you alright? The woman once more asked as she tried to help him up. Slight fear rose up in him as she reached for him. What had she done to him? He scrambled away from her hands and ended up looking like a squirming worm. His arms and legs felt weird. He chanced to glance at them while he still struggled to get away from the imposter. They even looked weird, like they had shrunk. He glanced over his shoulder to see where the woman was. Behind him on her knees she cast at him a worried look, but despite her kneeling position she was huge. Confused and disoriented he scrambled onto his back and managed to sit up. Sasuke, what is going on? She demanded, concern and confusion lacing her voice and face. Stay away from me. He squeaked and covered his mouth with two small hands. His voice. He sounded like a kid. The situation quickly fell into place as that realization dawned on him. His eyes raced around the room frantically, his quick eyes picking up the traits of his old room, a room that he hadn't stepped foot into for over 3 years. A genjutsu, it had to be an illusion. But his eyes should have seen through it. He gathered chakra and let out a pitiful amount with the word dispel in an effort to escape the genjutsu. His only result was his mother, no, not his mother, staring at him like he had just lost his mind. He tried once more but couldn't summon much more than what he had last time. His mother, no, she didn't try to touch him this time but just kept watching him with critical, worried eyes. Who are you? What did you do to me? He demanded, his panic still evident and his mind still hysterical over the fact that his voice was so childish. Immediately he covered his mouth again, but that only reminded him of his small size. I didn't do anything, Sasuke. What's wrong, honey? Did you have a nightmare? She tried to coax him into calming down, and reached out to comfort her little boy like any mother would. When she tried to grab his wrist to pull her into her embrace, instinctively he grabbed her hand and twisted it painfully just like he had been taught. Surprised at his action, she could only scream in pain as he let go and scrambled backwards until he hit the wall. The door flew open and Itachi flew into the room brandishing his kunai. He eyed the situation but confused he didn't say anything as their father stepped into the room. His mom, the woman, was now standing up and backing up to her husband with a strange look on her face. What's going on here? His father demanded as he frowned at his distraught wife and defensive son. She was holding her wrist in pain and Sasuke was crouched by the wall looking like a cornered animal. No one answered his question so he demanded once more. His voice was low and hard, promising punishment if unanswered. What is going on? I woke him up. He's confused and didn't recognize me. I tried to comfort him but she didn't finish. She looked at Sasuke pleadingly. What's wrong, honey? She tried asking again. Sasuke could only stare at the 3 people standing before him. His father, mother and big brother, Itachi. They looked so real that he could almost believe that it really was them staring down at him. But he took in their looks and he viciously fought down the unwanted need to run to them and hug them. They were looking at him like he was the crazy one, like they weren't an illusion that was bound to shatter when he started to believe. Sasuke, his father's voice ran out with steel, the tone that he used when he was displeased, exactly how he used to sound when Sasuke had done something he shouldn't have. His eyes whipped over to the older man. What are you doing? He grounded out. It took most of his will to not bow down his head and apologize to his father for disappointing him. It was strange, how he had tried so hard to get rid of these feelings but only for them to resurface as if years hadn't gone by. He caught himself despite his mind screaming at him to not submit to the genjutsu. He shook his head but didn't dare take his eyes off them. He had yet to look at Itachi. He couldn't bear to look into his eyes or look upon his face. He wouldn't be able to stand the mocking look that he was sure was there. Once more he was disappointing his father. He could never please his father. He was forever in the shadow of his brother. A flash of orange from outside brought his mind back to the issue at hand. Naruto, no. He closed his eyes, screw the illusion. This wasn't real. He was fighting Naruto. He was going to get the idiot out of his way even if he had to beat him out of the way. The stupid boy was always in the way, trying to distract him from his goal. Remembering how that goal had gone, maybe it would have been better if Naruto had steered him away from his goal. Sasuke, came Itachi's calm voice, sounding so much like it always did. This only made him shut his eyes harder and cover his ears. Someone was saying no. They kept repeating it over and Sasuke wanted them to shut the hell up. He needed silence to figure out how to get out of this illusion that hit way too close to home. Home. Naruto. Interchangeable in his mind, they meant the same thing. Where was that idiotic moron now? Did he lose? Did Naruto finally beat him? No, he didn't. He could remember the feeling of his left hand arm deep in his chest. The distinct memory of heat from the blood and tissue as his chidori ripped through tender flesh was clear in his mind. It was even clearer than these imposters in front of him. He heard his name being called once more, and to him it sounded a lot like Naruto. Did that mean he was alive? He had survived the last time, so maybe this time he had to know. He opened his eyes only to find them still there. The one playing Itachi moved forward and determined to find out if Naruto was alive or not, he jumped up and attacked. His sudden movement caught Itachi off guard, but like a true genius, he quickly gained the advantage despite his surprise. His brother easily countered his feeble attacks, and once again he was devastated that he couldn't even beat a fake. The last thing he saw was his mother's crying eyes as a blow, most likely from his father, landed on the back of his head. Naruto groaned as he rolled over only to promptly fall off. The feeling of falling blind paralyzed him, and all he could do was flail helplessly disoriented before he crashed to the ground with a painful thud. He sat up and gingerly rubbed the back of his head. He didn't know how long he had been out. The sun was going down, and in the dying light he saw that he was in the forest. These woods looked familiar, but at the same time he knew he hadn't been here in a while. How did he end up in the forest? He was facing off against Sasuke. And just like that everything came back and he growled, The news of Sasuke defeating Itachi, only for him to be too late to find him. The memory of the death of Jiraiya leading to his training with the Earth's chakra only to face off against Sasuke made him sick. That good senjutsu had done him. What good was it when he wasn't willing to use it? The last moments he remembered was going at Sasuke with his Rasengan, and faltering. Damn, in the end, he hadn't been able to do it. He couldn't bring himself to force Sasuke back at the cost of his life. That training had gone to waste. The question that Itachi had asked him all those months ago haunted him now. It seemed like he had his answer after all. He hadn't been able to find a way to save both Sasuke and his village. In the end, he couldn't even save one. What hurt more was that he hadn't been good enough to save Sasuke. As his heart clenched painfully, his usually dormant mind reared up and told him to look around and find out why he was in the forest. He rubbed his tears aside, slightly surprised that he was once more crying for that bastard. Gingerly he stood up, swaying slightly still. He leaned against a tree, probably the one he had fallen from, as he tried to figure out where he was exactly. He took a step but immediately fell forward and clung to the tree as nausea overwhelmed him. Whoa, he moaned. His gaze passed over his hands which were clutching the bark in front of him. For a moment he didn't think about it at all. It was just his hands which looked different. He stared harder, focusing his gaze on the back of his fingers. He couldn't quite pin down what the hell was so different about his hands. A mosquito landed on his left hand and his first thought was, wow, when did mosquitoes get so big here in Konoha? He slapped the insect away as it prepared itself to suck his blood. In the middle of swatting, he noticed that his hand even felt weird. He took a few moments to swing his hand around. That's when he saw his feet and it clicked. He panicked and he reached for his face, his hair frantically raking his face and hair in denial. He couldn't stop himself from trying to see everything on his body at once. Several more perusals confirmed it. He was tiny. No longer the 5'8" that he had grown, was still growing into, but a mere 4-something. Naruto did what no self-respecting shinobi would admit to doing. He fainted. He walked through the dark village quietly as he observed what was going on. He had woken up from his faint hours later after the sun had gone down completely. After a quick check to show that yes, he was still short and puny, he made his way to the village to see what the heck had happened. It had taken a little while before he had gotten used to being short again. Here he was staring at a Konoha that didn't look like it was preparing for war. There weren't any guards on sentry duty patrolling the streets. He concluded that it must have been past 3 since there weren't any drunks or civilians, ninjas even, stumbling around after a night out. He headed to the front gates where he knew where he had fought Sasuke. As he approached the gate, there was nothing more than the customary chunin on duty. They looked at him and told him to go to bed before they went back to their duty. Sasuke wasn't here. He couldn't feel the Uchiha's chakra, nor anyone else's for that matter. It was as if there hadn't been a major battle here recently. But there was. He knew there was. Was this an illusion? Had Sasuke somehow caught him in his Sharingan much like how Itachi had? If so then, what was the point of this? Itachi had done it to frighten him, but this so far was only confusing him and making him feel nostalgic, hardly a feeling to cause any painful demise. He decided to play it safe, illusion or not, and head home. Half an hour later he found himself outside his apartment only to find that it was locked. It sounded like there was someone in there though. He listened closer and confirmed that there was snoring coming from the other side of the door. Who the hell was in his apartment? Kakashi? No, he would never fall asleep in his place like that. Come to think of it, he'd never seen the older man actually sleep, much less snore that loud. Wait. He pulled back from his door. If he was kid, or really short, either way, then he wouldn't have gotten his apartment until he started at the academy. This meant that he was still living with that crabby old lady who always hit him every chance she got. That would explain why he was sleeping in the tree. He always ran away whenever he could. He was always found though and brought back. Naruto didn't realize he had been backing up until he hit the wall opposite the down, and his knees buckled, sending him sliding down onto the dirty floor. He could no longer see the door in front of him. This meant that he was what? 5? 6? The thought lodged itself into his mind, repeating itself over and over again, and before he knew it, his eyes had slid shut on their own accord. He wondered what age Sasuke was right now. That was the last thought that flitted through his mind as he registered vaguely that he just wanted to sleep and wake up to find out that this was just a dream. Get out of the way, demon! Naruto immediately snapped awake and instinctively blocked the kick aimed for his face. His mind didn't have time to take in the situation. His nerves were tingling from all his body sensors sending him information and overloading his hazy mind. He gripped the leg and flipped the intruder over. The intruder fell onto their back with a loud thump and a curse. Before they had a chance to get up, Naruto was already on their throat. He blinked when his hand was empty. He felt his thigh for his pack but touched nothing but skin. In his distraction he was heaved off, followed by a lot of shouting and yelling. He caught words like monster and demon brat, but he wasn't over the thought that he was still in the same hallway despite having fallen asleep. A heavy fist connected with his temple and he was sent fumbling into the wall. He took no notice except the fact that it hurt. He knew though that genjutsu could cause pain if the mind thought that it was real. So he let the fist connect again, as he centered his mind and tried to tell himself that it wasn't real. He had taken some lessons on genjutsus from Kakashi. The older man had imparted on him some tricks that he applied now. Genjutsu preyed on a weak mind, but if he could tell himself that this wasn't real, he could control the outcome of the illusion. After several more poundings that his child body couldn't take, he had to conclude that either the user really was powerful, Sasuke, or that this really wasn't a genjutsu, as his head throbbed with pain along with his ribs, which felt like they were broken or bruised. With a burst of chakra, he shoved the man away and he fled. Miles away on top of the Hokage monument, he sat hunched over as he inspected his injuries. His side was swollen from a vicious kick and his face was lumpy from several well-aimed punches. Of course they were well-aimed. He had sat there like an idiot trying to tell himself that this was an illusion. He gritted his teeth and stood up. He was going to try and find out just what the hell was really going on here. The stone before him held names, but these names he didn't know. The latest edition that he had been looking for wasn't there. He remembered the day that they had carved the old pervert's name onto the stone. It was a somber affair, and no one had spoken. Thinking about it made his heart clench painfully as he remembered first hearing the news. He shook his head, no use thinking about that now. He still had to figure out where the hell he was. This was Konoha. There wasn't any doubt about it. There was no way he wouldn't recognize the village that he loved. His attempts to find out people that he knew hadn't worked out too well. So far, all he could conclude from seeing the usual civilians was that he was in a situation much like when he was a child. Technically, he was a child, so that meant he didn't know anybody yet. He couldn't knock on Kakashi's door, and he hadn't met Sakura yet. The only person he knew at the moment was the old man, but that attempt had been futile. The guards had shoved him away and thrown in an extra cuff to his already abused head. But there was one person that he knew. He wondered briefly if he had the courage to go and find him. His family was still alive. His brother was still alive. He didn't know how the situation would end up. And frankly, he was just scared. After that fight, the last thing that he had felt before pain shot through him was the feeling of total dejection and utter failure. Did Sasuke really not want him there? Was he really willing to kill him after all? This Sasuke, if going with the whole theory that he was in the past for some reason, hadn't tried to kill him. But he did. Naruto didn't know if he could face him. He couldn't be sure that if he saw that pale face with dark eyes that he wouldn't punch the other for leaving him even though he hadn't left him. But he had. Oh. He let out a frustrated cry and fell to his knees in front of the stone memorial. So caught up in his internal struggle, he didn't notice the annoyed presence behind him. After a few moments, when he still didn't sense the person behind him, they let out an annoyed cough. Naruto spun around ready to defend himself as he threw an angry glare at the stranger. Said stranger threw his hands up in defense and tossed the angry blonde a disarming smile. It seemed he had interrupted somebody else's morning period. Or vice versa, as he always came here this time of the day every day, and he had never seen this kid here before. Come to think of it, the stranger looked at the kid carefully. It was the demon vessel. What do you want? He snarled at the older man. He took in the dark hair and pale skin. Just like Sasuke. He noted the vest depicting the status of Chunin or above. The eyes were friendly, but they were staring at him nonetheless, just like he was. The man finally answered, Naruto, right? The blonde only glared at him harder and answered with his own question. Who are you? The man didn't seem to take any offense, like he was used to grouchy individuals. A friend, he started and took a step forward. Naruto took a wary step back. He didn't have any friends yet at this age. The man kept his gaze but stepped past him to touch the stone of Hatake Kakashi. A man who sacrificed his life for his comrades in the name of duty for the village, he finished softly as his eyes carefully traced the characters carved into the stone. His fingers traced over them, as if trying to memorize the grooves. He was no longer looking at the blonde and therefore missed the bewildered look that had overcome his entire face and posture. That was impossible. Kakashi? Forever young, weird and quirky Kakashi? The man who was always there in his own way. No way that he could be Naruto couldn't finish that thought. What the hell was this? He tore his eyes from the lying man only to see those fingers tracing the unmistakable kanji. Hatake Kakashi. He was a good friend of mine, even if he didn't ever say so or act so until the very end. Who would have guessed that the stuck-up bastard would shove me out of the way? The man continued, unaware of the turmoil that he had just caused in the young boy beside him. I want to go back just so I can wring his neck and then yell at him for not saying anything sooner, you know? He should have said or done something sooner so that we could have had more time. And then maybe, he paused, just maybe he would still be here. Those words filtered into Naruto's brain, and he looked up at the wistful man. My name's Obito, Hatake Obito. He looked down at the kid as he introduced himself finally. He reached down, and Naruto didn't have the strength to knock his hand away, but all the man did was wipe away his tears. He blinked and looked down, noticing for the first time that he had been crying again. Second time in 2 days. The thought that he was pathetic came to mind, but he didn't care. He didn't care as he continued to cry for a man that had been like a weird uncle almost. For a man that he had yet to meet but knew all too well. Obito lowered himself and took the kid into his arms as he tried to soothe the crying child. Soon his silent tears turned to sobs and his small, bruised body shook as he took comfort from the stranger. He couldn't remember the last time he had cried like this. He woke up silently, much like he had been doing for the past week or so. There was no daylight here in the cells beneath the military police department. Funny that his clan ran the department, but he had never seen these cells himself. He had lost track of the time after 8 days. The meals weren't even regular, a method used to keep prisoners disoriented just like now. He recalled attacking and losing. Afterwards he found himself here in this dank cell covered in seals that suppressed his chakra. It was a pitiful amount compared to what he had grown to after all those hellish years with Orochimaru. Seal or no seal, he hadn't even been able to fight back when they came to question him. The worst was being suspected, that he was an imposter. They had demanded so many times what he had done to the real Sasuke. Where was he? What did he want? What were his motives? Who hired him? He had snarled and growled insults at them the first day. After the second day of injections and beatings they had left him alone. He hadn't seen anybody since then. In his haze of pain and truth serums he couldn't be sure what he had told them. Hell, he didn't even remember what they had asked him that second day. His mind recoiled slightly at the pain, but mentally he shook himself. He had never really thought that Leaf would be capable of this level of torture. This was nothing compared to what he had endured already though. Yet, of course Leaf was capable of torture. They had sentenced his clan to death, didn't they? For the sake of the village. Fuck them, his clan was as much a part of the village as were the other ninjas and civilians. They were very capable. This brought him back to his current predicament. He knew that Leaf harbored numerous forbidden jutsus, even more than Orochimaru knew maybe. It was still a formidable village despite the countless attempts to bring it down. He had concluded that this most likely wasn't a genjutsu that he was stuck in unless it really was such an elaborate one that could go on for days. Even the Mangekyou didn't last that long, so the only logical thought to follow was that after the final blow with Naruto, he had passed out and had been captured. He was being held prisoner, and the interrogation was only meant to dig out information. They were probably debating the date of his execution, but what was the point in an illusion? And why put him in the past? They could have just as easily gone through with the interrogation without the elaborate jutsu, so here he was again. This was the kink that just wouldn't iron itself out, not matter how he thought about it. The only way that this whole mess would make sense would be if he was in the past. And it would make sense with the first day of questioning. It would also explain the fact of life that he was 5 or 6. Itachi hadn't murdered the clan yet as the police department was still here, so he was almost 6, then that would mean he was in the past. For sure. But to accept that would what? He didn't know. What the hell was he supposed to do? Change everything? He let out a hollow laugh. How the fuck am I going to change anything if I'm stuck in this body and in a cell no less? When his sour amusement faded, he started to think on that note. What else could he do? So Uchiha Sasuke began planning his escape. He had a chance to make things right whether this was real or not. It was still a chance. He remembered that day that he had changed the name of his makeshift team to Hawk. The hurt that made him cry for the first time in a long time rekindled inside, burning him raw. How he wished he had known, had remembered what had really gone on that night. How he wished that he hadn't been an ignorant little brat who could only pester his brother about training. Even after all that he had tried to reach his brother, he had still been too weak. He had always been too weak. His fist shot out and slammed into the concrete wall. He ignored the flare of pain at the torn skin and the broken bones. He was a kid, but he wasn't a stupid brat anymore. This time, he'd cover that gap that he never had a chance in the last lifetime. Carefully, he ripped off a piece of his tattered shirt and wrapped his hand. This was the last thing he needed. He needed to rein in his temper. On his bloody hand, Sasuke swore that this was going to be the last stupid thing he did. His hand primitively bandaged, he sat back against the wall, and he waited. He just had to bide his time until he could escape. Naruto woke up to the smell of rice and something else. Groggily, he sat up and rubbed the sticky residue from his eyes. Opening his eyes, he found them to be puffy and swollen. He then remembered that he had been crying at the memorial stone. He must have fallen asleep. He looked around the room that he was in and found it to be messy and rather lived in. Framed photos lined the walls haphazardly while bookshelves as high as the door were stuffed with scrolls and texts that looked like they had seen better days. He climbed out of the bed, forgetting to adjust for the height difference, and ended up stumbling onto his hands and knees. At the commotion, the door swung open and a curious head poked in. "Hey, good morning. Just checking to see that you're still alive," he said good-naturedly. He stepped into the room fully and watched the blonde as he picked himself off the floor. "I made breakfast. I bet you're starving. Looks like you hadn't eaten in a while," he spoke up once Naruto was up. "Bathroom's that way. When you're done, you can eat," he pointed out cheerfully when the kid still didn't say anything. Naruto nodded slightly to show that he heard and then turned and headed toward the bathroom. Obito scratched his head and just shrugged. The kid would talk when he was ready. 15 minutes later, a tired Naruto walked out from the bedroom door. He sat himself down across from the stranger. Obito, that's what he had called himself. But he had also given Kakashi's last name as his own, which Naruto knew wasn't possible. Kakashi was an only child. Not to mention this guy didn't look a thing like his teacher. No crazy silver hair despite the cheerful attitude. Well, even he was too cheerful. Kakashi's cheerful hit a sharp calculating gaze, but this guy didn't seem to have that. You gonna eat or something? He asked the kid who hadn't touched his food yet. He had put up with the open staring for as long as he could. You said your last name was Hataki, Naruto started off. He couldn't outright accuse the guy of not being related. He didn't know Kakashi yet. I never will. His chest ached at that, but he pushed it away. Yeah, the man answered in a slightly lilting tone as if to see what Naruto had against it. From that it seemed like being questioned was a rather common thing then. He didn't look a thing like Kakashi. As a matter of fact, he looked more like Sasuke than the infamous Jounin. You look like an Uchiha, he said straight up. Naruto noted the slight tensing of the jaw muscle and the defensive look that came into his eyes. This was a sore subject for the man. I'm not an Uchiha, he said evenly as he stared down the annoyingly perceptive brat in front of him. And how would you know? You don't even know who he was or whether or not we look alike. As soon as he said it, he realized that he was getting his hackles all raised up by a kid. He let out a sigh at the silent boy. Look kid, I didn't mean to snap at you. Just drop it, okay? He offered a slight apology. Why? Naruto asked. He had to know. Kakashi had never talked about his team, but Naruto had found a photo of Kakashi and his team with the fourth. This man looked like he was a teammate that hadn't survived back in his time. Why what? The man asked, although he had a feeling what the kid was asking. Naruto just looked at him and asked again, why did you take on his name? He stared into those dark eyes, so much like another stubborn Uchiha that he knew. He still had to find Sasuke, but for now he just needed to know this one thing. No one ever stood against his will for long when he wanted something except for one person. Uchiha or not, this wasn't the person who wouldn't cave to him. We were teammates, he started off slowly after a few minutes of silence. There was a mission to destroy a vital bridge that would cripple Rock. I hated him, but I wouldn't let him die. Apparently he thought the same, as he chose me over the mission. He shoved me out of the way of the avalanche. I owe him my life, he finished almost inaudibly. Naruto exhaled sharply. No wonder Kakashi never talked about him. It must have been the other way around. That's how he had gotten the Sharingan. Now he knew the real reason that Kakashi was so adamant about teamwork. I'm sorry, Naruto apologized sincerely. The man looked at him startled, like he had forgotten the blonde was there. Yeah, he mumbled, then his eyes surveyed Naruto critically. You sound like you knew him. Naruto could only smile slightly at that, slightly nostalgic. You could say that I knew someone like him, he answered quietly, and the man left it at that. Okay, eat up. Then scram, I have a mission later today that I have to get done. He stood up and hesitated. He knew people didn't like the kid. Personally, he had never talked to him, and only saw him every once in a while. Even then, though, he saw the way he was treated. It reminded him all too much of himself back in his younger days with no one to defend him. He had stuck out like a sore thumb among his elite cousins and was ridiculed merciless for it. You can come back later whenever you want when I'm done with my mission, which should be in a couple of days, he rambled quickly before he threw in a joke. You can survive for that long, right? The boy didn't smile at first as he regarded the man to see if he was serious. Then his entire face did a 180 and he beamed at the man. Of course I can survive for 2 days by myself. How do you think I'm still here? He boasted, and while Obito grinned back, inside he really did wonder how the kid could still smile like that. Naruto was walking along the main road. He had been discreetly searching Konoha, especially by the academy and the playground and even by the lake that was off a ways by the Uchiha compound. Still, no sign of the elusive Sasuke. He didn't dare approach anyone else, and he shied away from Shikamaru and the others when they were at the playground. The only person he talked and interacted with was Obito, and that had only been that first time and a couple of days ago. The man was busy and was constantly away on missions. Naruto only really had his own company, and that of the empty apartment. For the past week he had been trying to find Sasuke but had come up empty-handed. Several scenarios came to mind after a while. What if Sasuke had never been born? There were plenty of Uchihas still walking around, so he figured they were still all alive. But there wasn't any signs of the other boys, so he might never have. Naruto shook his head. He couldn't think like that. Just because Kakashi was dead, it didn't mean that Sasuke hadn't been born either. There was just no way that Sasuke hadn't been born. Maybe it was time he stopped procrastinating and went and saw the old man Hokage. It was only a matter of time before the old man noticed that he wasn't with his caretaker. The more that Naruto thought about it, the more excited he became to see the Hokage. 3 years was long time to miss someone. He practically bounced his way up to the tower. There was no way that he'd let some stupid guards turn him away this time. Half an hour later Naruto was sneaking around the corner of the hallway. When the coast was clear, he dashed to the door and opened it quickly but silently, and slipped in. Once inside he closed the door with a loud slam and looked up with his best grin. He had just proven that he still had it in him to be sneaky. His grin disappeared though at the sight before him. Instead of the red and white Hokage hat there was a mop of blonde hair attached to a mumbling, brush-holding person who was obviously not the old man. Hey Naruto, let me finish this first then I'll get to you, the blonde thing mumbled around the brush in his mouth. Naruto could only gape at the man. He was sitting there in the flesh, worrying about some inconsequential paper like he hadn't been dead for over 15 years. The fourth swore loudly, forgetting that there was a child in the room when the brush in his mouth fell and splattered onto the document he was reading. As he tried to catch the fallen brush, the one in his hand made an even larger slash across the already ruined scroll. For once in his life, Naruto was speechless, not because it hurt too much or because Sasuke had managed to one-up him in their banter. He was just in shock. He didn't notice that his mouth was moving erratically, trying to form something to say. Finally his brain managed to send out a sequence of words that his mouth could process. You're dead, he gasped out, unaware that his words would be taken differently. Yondaime looked up distractedly from his desk with a frown. His face had ink stains on them, and he added even more when he wiped his hair out of his eyes. He needed a trim one of these days. I know I've been busy, but that's no reason to want me dead, the man teased. He set the brush down with a mental sigh at the sight of the ruined scroll. His aide was going to give him that look again. The blonde boy didn't even process the teasing, just the fact that he was alive and breathing and talking to him. Suddenly the overload of surprises made itself known, and Naruto did the only thing he could think of that might make things better aside from fainting, that is. He took a step back plus another until he felt the door behind him. Grabbing the handle, he eased it open and stuttered out, I think I have the wrong room. And just like that he left as quickly as he had entered. The fourth's eyes widened in surprise. That was weird, even for Naruto. What had that boy gotten himself into this time? The thought that the villagers, or worse, his ninja, had done something to the boy behind his back made him furious. As his anger rose, he stood up only to let out a breath in an attempt to calm down. He had to see the boy first before he could go jumping to conclusions, or worse, jumping people and preferably pounding them into the ground. He went to the door and opened it. He could no longer feel the kid's chakra anywhere, but he had half expected the boy to be standing outside waiting to pounce on him for a prank. Well, the boy was outside in the hallway, but he didn't look like he would be doing any pouncing. In fact, it looked like he had seen a ghost. If Naruto knew what the fourth was thinking, he couldn't have agreed more with that thought. As it was, he was having trouble just concentrating and breathing and not fainting. He was perilously close, and the older man approaching him was not helping. The fourth bent down and placed a hand on the boy's shoulder only to have him jerk away with wild eyes. Naruto? He was concerned. What the hell happened? He had never seen the kid like this before, even after some of the first attempts on his life. Tell me what's wrong, son, he gently cooed. Unfortunately, his attempt only had the kid's eyes widening in disbelief before those blue eyes rolled, and the kid fainted. Shit! He caught the limp body that hardly weighed a thing, and he swore someone was going to pay. He'd start with that damn caretaker. Where the hell was that woman anyway? He roared out to the guards to call over a medic. They scrambled to obey the suddenly furious Hokage. Rarely did the man ever lose his temper, and it only seemed to happen around the little demon brat. But no one dared to say anything lest he turn on them. He lifted the boy and took him back into his office. He had learned not to take him to the hospital unless Rin was there, and she wasn't and wouldn't be back until later that day. There wasn't anywhere to place the unconscious boy, so he simply sat down in his chair with Naruto in his lap. After what seemed like forever, the door opened, and a harried medic rushed in with a Chunin guard. What's wrong, Hokage-sama? The man asked as he quickly approached. He had been called in several times for the blonde boy, and he knew the fourth had no patience for dawdling. He was acting weird scared actually. Then he just fainted when after I tried to get him to tell me what was wrong, the fourth rambled out quickly, nervous that he had done something wrong to the boy to incite the bout of fainting. Scared of what? The medic asked calmly for the both of them as he checked the boy's vitals. The talking was more for the older blonde, who the medic knew hated situations like these. Scared of me, Yondaime whispered, only loud enough for the medic to hear. At that the medic frowned. That wasn't right. The boy adored the fourth and would never do that, and he told the older blonde so. I know, but he stopped himself. He wasn't helping the situation, and the medic didn't need to act as his psychiatrist. How is he? He asked instead. The medic had pulled back, causing the blonde to ask. He's fine, there's nothing wrong with his physically. But his chakra's a little chaotic, mostly due to a mental occurrence. The diagnosis left much unsaid, but the implications were there of what could have happened. Nothing that a quick nap won't cure, at least temporarily, the medic offered quickly as he watched the fourth's face darken. The man seemed to catch himself once again, and he nodded. Thank you. He gave him his gratitude, and the medic waved it off. He dismissed the man and the guard. He didn't let go of the little boy in his arms. Many called him unreasonable for getting so worked up over the kid, but he knew that if he had had a son, half this shit wouldn't have happened in the first place. Some days he would fall into a depression as he regretted placing the burden of the fox demon into the baby boy. Holding the boy now, he could almost pretend that this was his son and that he could make everything right. Hell, the kid even looked like him. And he shared his love of ramen as well. But he knew he didn't have a son. Any chance of that had fled when he broke Kushina's heart, and she had left him. The child whimpered and he pulled the boy closer as he whispered sweet nothings to soothe him. Naruto quieted down when those warm arms tightened around him. Like a baby in its parent's embrace, he slept on. In another part of Konoha, a sleeping boy was woken by the sound of his cell door opening. This person was silent, unlike the others who had marched in. The door closed as quickly as it had opened, and the figure approached him with a bundle in their arms. Too tired to really care what this person planned to do with him, he let them approach. The figure squatted down in front of him. He didn't bother to hide the fact that he was awake. Sasuke, the figure murmured brokenly as it hesitated, not sure what to do. He recognized the voice immediately. Who didn't know the voice of their own mother? He didn't move, despite all his thinking of the past week. Whether this was real or not, this was his mother, and he was for all intents and purposes 6 years old. Mom, he choked out with a sob. There weren't any more thoughts as both embraced each other fiercely. Sasuke let himself go and just cried. His mother pulled him onto her lap and hugged him tighter as he sobbed harder. He didn't hear anything that she said other than the fact that she was talking to him, and the sound of her voice was enough to ease him. Soon he was asleep, but Mikoto continued to rock him. She hadn't seen her baby boy in over a week. Fugaku had refused to tell her what was going on, and finally fed up she had snuck in here to see her boy only to find him looking half dead. Honestly, she didn't care what they said about him, and she didn't care that he had hurt her. She knew her boy was hurting and he was confused. Call it maternal instincts, but no matter what they said about him being an imposter, she knew her baby. He needed her, and to hell with anyone else. She brushed her fingers through his hair softly, her heart wrenching at the dirty matted strands. Her boy's hairs were so soft, and to see them looking like this made her want to cry again. She smoothed his hair down and wrapped her arm around his back again. She wasn't going to stand aside and let them take this son from her as well. Itachi had been a given, being the firstborn to the head of the clan. That's why she had tried so hard to have a second child. Finally, 7 years after Itachi and her little Sasuke was born. He was a desperate little thing, always seeking approval from the 2 male figureheads in his life. When he got a little bit from Itachi, he had grown so attached. Secretly, she had been glad that Fugaku hadn't cared much for Sasuke. But now that this had happened, whatever this was, there really wasn't any way for her to save her baby boy without bringing the entire clan upon them. She wouldn't be able to live an outcast like that. She would be useless that way, unable to help him. Yet there was hope. There was someone who had gone against the clan head unwillingly, and was still alive and for the most part happy. Happier than he had ever been. Mikoto stopped rocking her child and she stood up, grabbing the blanket at the same time. Carefully so as not to wake him, she wrapped him up, and a quick genjutsu made it look like she wasn't holding anyone at all. She hadn't been a kunoichi for nothing. "Yo, Minato!" came the loud greeting as the office door opened. A head of spiky black hair poked in, followed by a large grin. He would have said more, but a quick shushing noise from the blonde had him closing his mouth and raising his brow in question. Then he spotted the blonde bundle in his former teacher's lap. Recognition took a few seconds to hit him in the head, but by then Minato was already talking. "Don't talk too loud, Obito," he warned. The younger man rolled his eyes, but he whispered anyway back, "He sleeps like the dead, don't worry about it." "What?" He narrowed his eyes at the nonchalant boy. Immediately seeing the man's reaction, he jerked back in disgust and shook his head. "Not like that. Don't think such things. The kid's been crashing at my place for the past week," he hastily explained, then added with a shudder, "Geez, you think I'd do something totally creepy like spy on a kid?" Appeased, Minato fired back a response to tease the boy. "Oh, that's right. You like soft skin," and he spoke with a teasing leer in his voice. Obito turned bright red and sputtered incoherently, unable to deny the claim but embarrassed nonetheless that he would say it so openly, in front of a child too for that matter. It didn't matter if he was sleeping or not. Speaking of the kid, he started to wake up. Instantly Minato's heart and eyes were on him, promising him something unpleasant later for waking up the boy. "Wah!" He sputtered again. He didn't finish as Minato wasn't even looking at him anymore but focused on the waking boy. Good grief, the Hokage was acting like a new mother. Of course, don't tell him that he had even thought about saying it. Minato would just prove it by punishing him. Naruto let out a waking grumble. He stretched around his warm sleeping bed and briefly wondered why his bed was vertical before he yawned and pulled back to get away from whatever was tickling his face. One eye opened automatically to scout his surroundings. It was really comfortable, and all he wanted to do was snuggle up against his vertical bed and go back to sleep, but his stubborn eye stayed open as it had seen something. He stared at the white cloth in front of his face and half listened to the heartbeat coming from his bed. Ever so slowly did he come to realize what the white cloth, which his brain finally processed to be a coat, and the heartbeat meant. Oh crap. His mind raced a mile a minute to try to remember how he had ended up here in the first place. Despite his racing mind, his body stayed lethargic and uncooperative, especially when he demanded it to move away from the man. He only managed a slow blink of an eye when he finally remembered that he had fainted. Again, he pulled his head back and looked up at the face peering down softly at him. It really was him. The fourth was looking down at him with a gentle smile on his face. Naruto could only stare back in awe. The warmth of feelings that flooded his heart and mind were more than words could describe. Father. Was it really him? If this was a genjutsu after all, he was totally screwed. But if it wasn't then, what did he have to lose by giving in? He let out a tiny smile and let out a breath that he hadn't realized he'd been holding. However, the look of surprise on the fourth's face made that smile vanish. Had he called him father out loud? From the looks of it, he did, and the fourth wasn't taking it too well. The man had gone white, and his hold had slackened immensely. Before he could say anything though, Naruto shoved himself off the older blonde's lap and ran. He didn't know where he was going to go, but he wouldn't be able to stand rejection. He already got it enough from one person. He hadn't even made it to the door this time before he was scooped off his feet by Obito. The pale man held on tight to the squirming boy, knowing that he couldn't let him go like that. Obito knew about Minato's parental instincts toward the boy, and to have been called father like that was a shock. It wasn't a bad one, but it was still shock. One that he should be getting over any time now. Like he said, any time now? He struggled to hold the 6-year-old without hurting him while he waited for the fourth to snap out of his stupor. Sensei! Impatient that the man was just standing there while he was getting attacked by the kid, he yelled at the man to do something. Minato blinked and sprung into action. Naruto! He made a grab for the boy and dodged several kicks as he wrapped his arms around the little boy once more. He hadn't quite been able to dodge the frantic swipe of tiny arms though. He talked quietly in a low voice to try and calm the boy down. Holding on tight and refusing to let go, he managed to turn Naruto around without dropping him. Immediately, instead of fighting, the boy clung to him tightly, sobbing "Dad" over and over again. Both clung to each other fiercely. Later, Naruto would say that this behavior stemmed from years of being alone, and the fact that he really was no more than a child. With the body and mind of a kid, he finally gave in. His eyes were bleary and puffy when he woke up to the sound of humming. Disoriented and not at all sure where he was, he tensed as he took in his surroundings. The room was messy and full of bookshelves crammed with scrolls and other knickknacks. Some random part of his mind wanted to look and see if there actually was anything useful there. There were lots of photos on the wall. Some looked like they were about to fall off the wall soon. He didn't see anyone that he recognized from the photos from the wall. One particular picture though stood out amongst the rest. Unlike the others, this one was well framed and it hung on the wall solemnly, like someone constantly straightened it every day. There were 4 figures in the photo, yet it was the pose that drew his attention in the first place. A taller man in the back with 3 little brats up front. It looked so much like his own photo of his old team. After a closer look, the silver hair belonged not to an old man but a youth. There was only one person that Sasuke knew had hair that stuck out like that. Kakashi. Was this his place then? If so, how did he get here? Since he was 6, that would make Kakashi only 17 or so. Not so much older than he had once been. How had he gotten here? Memories came back slowly, and once he remembered his mother, the rest hit him hard. The realization that his mother had broke him out of jail made his heart ache with happiness and guilt. Where was she now? Sasuke's thoughts were cut short as the humming stopped and footsteps approached the door to the room. He braced himself for the sight of a young Kakashi. Slightly terrified, he clenched his fist. He had no idea what to expect. The door opened and Sasuke jerked in surprise. The man grinned at the boy's reaction. Whoever he was expecting, he sure hadn't been the one. "Hey, you're finally awake," he commented cheerfully. "About time too. You've been out for a day now." Sasuke gaped. This wasn't Kakashi. He had been quite sure that it would be him. He was strangely disappointed. He hadn't seen the man since he had been lectured by him, all those years ago. "I bet you're wondering how you got here, right?" he asked the boy, wanting to get that strange look out of his eyes. "Geez, what's up with all these serious kids these days?" The only answer he received was narrowed eyes and a short nod. "Well, your mom brought you here, spouting some stuff about you acting weird and getting locked up. Now, from the impression I got, you're supposed to stay out of sight for a while until things cool down or something like that," he rattled offhandedly. Things fell into place in Sasuke's mind after that vague explanation. So his mom had freed him. But that left the question of who this guy was. He couldn't recall this man from his memories at all. "Who are you?" "Me? I suppose you wouldn't recognize me, would you? You were just a tiny little squalling thing when I left the clan. I'm Obito, your disowned cousin now known as Hatake Obito." He grinned at his own introduction. Sasuke's eyes widened again. This was his cousin? And he had been disowned? No one went against the clan, and certainly no one left the clan on their own free will. Well, his mother had just done the first, and apparently this guy had done the latter. But what surprised him more was the surname he had taken on. Hatake. Hatake Kakashi. That was more than coincidence that his last name was the same as his former mentor. What right did this man have to take the name of the infamous shinobi? He opened his mouth to demand an explanation only to shut it and blush when his stomach let out a deep rumble. To his irritation and embarrassment, the man laughed out loud. The sound was grating and loud to his ears, much like Naruto's cackle when he had just pulled off a prank. It made him think of Naruto and the fact that he still didn't know what had happened to him. An accurately thrown pillow smacked the man in the face, effectively shutting him up for a second before he squawked indignantly and muttered something about stupid brats under his breath. He was still grinning though. "All right, you're hungry and I've got some food." "Man, are you guys trying to eat me out of my home? First Naruto and now you," he ranted. Sasuke's attention was instantly captured at the mention of Naruto. With an anxious glare he asked about Naruto. Naruto? You know that kid? He eyed the younger Uchiha suddenly in a new light. Any Uchiha who would know the name of the demon brat was someone to pay attention to. His mind raced and he calculated the results of the words he could say. His mother obviously trusted this man, his cousin. And the fact that he knew Naruto and that Naruto was here or had been here made it seem to him like he could trust him as well. He thought about shrugging it off like he really didn't care, but his vow came back to the forefront of his mind. Now it was only a matter of opinion, if his next words were going to break that vow or not. He's a friend, he murmured quietly as he watched the man consider his words carefully. It wasn't a lie. Despite all that had happened, which hadn't happened, he still considered Naruto the person closest to him. The one person he trusted most. Well, ain't that something? Looks like I've got another troublemaker in my hands, the man grinned. Yeah, the brat stops by here every once in a while and eats a shitload of ramen. He doesn't stay with me though, thank God. I'd really be out of food then. The kid's a bottomless stomach, you know? Yeah, Sasuke agreed, unaware that he had a slight smile in his eyes as he remembered the times that they had gone to that ramen stand. Obito stared at him for a moment before he pulled the kid back to the present. Food's this way. And if you want, I can see if I can lure him here so you can have some company, Obito suggested, to which Sasuke nodded. He slowly got out of the bed, discreetly trying to stretch his weak muscles. He grimaced at his skinny limbs, hating the feeling of weakness in his legs as he stood up. The bruises were fading, but he was damn sore. It took a lot for him to suppress the groan of pain at taking his first steps. All he wanted to do was crawl back onto the bed. Screw eating, he hurt so bad. It was only the thought that the sooner he got better, which came with eating, the sooner he could see Naruto. With the thought of the blonde in mind, he determinedly made his way out of the room and into the kitchen. He'd eat something even if he had to force it down. If the man noticed his discomfort, he didn't say anything, and for that he was grateful. Obito watched the boy struggle out of the bed and inch out of the room. He knew how it felt to struggle both physically and mentally. Had he still been an immature brat, he would have said something, but he took a page out of Kakashi's book, like he tried to do every day, and stayed silent, knowing that sometimes words were meaningless despite the best of intentions. So what does it look like? Is it orange? Naruto asked excitedly on the way to Obito's apartment. The older man had picked him up from the Hokage Tower, where he had been spending time with his father for the past few days. He had fallen easily into the routine of son and father, with Obito acting as an uncle. He hadn't seen the loud, funny man since the day before. The man's excuse had been that he had gotten lost and came across a stray that he just had to pick up, hence the day's delay at seeing his favorite brat. Naruto had protested loudly that he was lying, and the antics began from there until Minato threw them out for being too loud. Don't get into any trouble, he yelled after them before the door closed. Obito snorted something along the lines, of course we won't. Naruto promptly began asking questions as to how the stray looked like and what it was. No, it's not orange, it's got black hair. He didn't exactly want to call the little brat a fur ball despite its feisty attitude. The kid had eaten regularly and was gaining some weight, but his demeanor was distant and aloof. Any time that he had tried to loosen the kid up had ended with silence and a glare. The boy was only 6, yet he had already perfected the trademark Uchiha glare. He must have gotten it from his father, because Itachi sure as hell didn't glare like that. Speaking of that weasel, he should be coming back sometime tonight. He'd have to remind himself to stop by and get some information from him about what the hell was going on. Just because he wasn't part of the clan anymore didn't mean he couldn't stick his nose in their business. Black hair? Isn't it a cat? Naruto's face scrunched up in confusion. What the hell did you pick up? His words brought Obito back to his situation. Watch your mouth, kid. Your dad's gonna fry me alive if he even thinks that you get your language from me, he chastised, but continued, it's not a cat. What is it then? Can I play with it? You said that I could play with it. Naruto blabbered on. This was so much fun pestering Obito. Not only could he say whatever he wanted, he was a kid and he could damn well act like one. Of course, his choice of vocabulary could be more innocent, but Obito got the heat on that, and it was hilarious watching his dad loom over the other cowering man. He never thought he had a sadistic streak in him, but apparently he did. You'll see when we get there, geez, he mumbled. It was another 4 blocks to his apartment, and while he didn't mind Naruto at all, he needed to get this over with so he could go corner the stray's brother. Come on, Naruto, he bent over and scooped the boy up onto his back. Several people glanced at them, some with distaste, others just curious. They had gotten used to the Uchiha black sheep hanging out with the demon brat. He sped off with Naruto screaming and laughing happily on his back. I beat you! Naruto shouted as he threw open the door. Obito had indeed been beaten as he came up the stairs with a scowl. The kid had tricked him and sent him running all over the freaking village. How all this had happened in 3 blocks he wasn't sure, but it sure as hell wasn't going to happen again. It had started off with a boast from Naruto that he could outrun the man. Obito was never one to turn down a challenge, and the race was on. No fair. He was so not going to argue with a kid. Then again, who said he couldn't? You lied. Naruto rolled his eyes, but the huge grin on his face couldn't be denied as he jumped through the doorway and slammed the door shut in Obito's face. He laughed loudly and obnoxiously as he stepped back and turned right into something. The insults and loud shouting were getting closer. It sounded like it was right outside the door. But what was more was that it sounded really familiar. "I beat you!" And the door flew open, nearly knocking his face off. He would have stepped out of the way, but the sight before him froze him. In front of him, in the flesh, including that ugly orange jumpsuit, was none other than Naruto. Naruto. The other boy was grinning and laughing, completely unaware of his frozen presence behind him. He had been waiting for the blonde to show up, but to actually have him there came as a shock. He couldn't bring himself to say that simple word that longed to bust from him that would confirm that this really was Naruto. He was moving now. Obito had said something, but whatever he said had gone in one ear and out the other. His attention was focused only on the boy before him. The blonde laughed and slammed the door shut, only to turn and slam into him. Instinct took over as Naruto jumped back and reached for a pouch that wasn't there. He had jumped back as well, but his hands stayed clenched at his sides. "Who the hell?" Naruto exclaimed in surprise, but immediately went silent and slack as recognition settled in. His blue eyes rounded in surprise and disbelief as his jaw slackened with inability to form words. He couldn't say that he wasn't doing the same thing, but seeing his friend in person was something else. The fight came back to him full force, and he fought not to bend down with the weight of his actions. His left arm could still feel the blood and gore from that amplified Chidori. Naruto was having difficulty breathing. There he stood in front of him, alive and in one piece. The first thought that bombarded him was that Sasuke really was alive. Fate and chance hadn't killed him in this time like it did with Kakashi. He looked different from the last time he had saw him. Younger obviously, but he lacked that aged appearance that vengeance had given him. There wasn't anything dark looming over him that he could see. The next thought was that he was here in Obito's apartment. For some reason that thought was prominent, and it forced its way to the front of his mind. "Sasuke?" he asked tentatively, afraid that if this was genjutsu, hoping that it wasn't, he didn't want it to disappear. Having Naruto call his name pulled him back from that devastating act. He saw now the young Naruto before him, and not the young man that he had could become because of him. Like a switch, his brain started to function again and he could talk. That one word burst from his lips with the calm of an Uchiha. "Dobe." Just like that, Naruto's face went from shock to disbelief to instant offense. "Team! Don't call me that!" And he lunged at the pale boy. They wrestled and fought, laughed and cried until they had no more energy to move. Only when they were both lying still on the floor catching their breath that they felt the drying tears on their faces. Each tried discreetly to wipe them off even as they eyed each other. Naruto broke into a smile first, which Sasuke slowly followed. It was good to see the other again. Neither questioned why they acted the way they did. Too overwhelmed just to see each other, they forgot that they're not supposed to know each other at all. They sat there not moving, simply staring until Naruto's gaze darted to Sasuke's mussed-up hair. "Your hair's black," he said, puzzled. Wondering if he was onto something, Sasuke gave a slow nod. "You're the stray." Naruto pointed a finger at Sasuke in accusation, while the young Uchiha looked back incredulously. "Idiot!" he scolded. "What the hell are you talking about?" Naruto immediately dropped from his epiphany of finally figuring Obito out. Sasuke rolled his eyes. To think that he had been about to take the blonde seriously for once. Outside the window, Obito rolled his eyes as well. Had he ever been that dumb as a kid? Minato would probably say so. He shook it off and leapt away. They were getting along. Hell, it looked like they were best friends and hadn't seen each other in years. He'd asked Itachi about that as well. He didn't think Sasuke had ever left the village compound yet, nor was Naruto ever let in to the best of his knowledge. Maybe there really was something to the Uchiha's drastic actions. A week had gone by since they had been reunited. The two had chosen to simply enjoy their childhood like they never had the chance to before and not bring up their past circumstances. Despite the unknown and unspoken choices, they each decided that some things couldn't be left up to chance. Sasuke debated if he should tell Naruto about himself. The blonde hadn't asked him once why he wasn't with his family. He hadn't asked Naruto about his family either, so the shock of seeing the fourth come strolling into the room and having Naruto run up to him calling him Dad nearly did him in. That was just the way it was, one surprise after another. His mom had sent him a letter the other day saying that he should still stay put, and that she loved him and missed him. Even with everything happening and not happening, there was still Naruto, the only constant. They stayed together like glue, and where one was, the other could be found. If they wanted to go out, Obito had to disguise Sasuke. The man had too much fun trying different things on the boy, much to his chagrin. It didn't help that Naruto's ideas were worse. He wanted to dress Sasuke up as girl. A punch to the face was his answer to that. Naruto complained as Obito went about getting the original disguise in place. With the disguise in place, they had gone to visit Minato in the tower. The Hokage had taken a look at the boy with his son and greeted him with open arms. A hug and a hair ruffle later, the two were back to messing around. Minato confided quietly to Obito that the disguise may have worked once so long as he was with Naruto, but sharper eyes would soon see through it. "I've got a solution, but I'll do it later tonight," Minato spoke quietly. Obito nodded and glanced at the two who were now wrestling around on the floor. Sasuke had managed to get the upper hand, but sneaky Naruto had slipped his arms past Sasuke's and started tickling him. A forced peal of laughter escaped before Sasuke gritted his teeth and began his counter-attack as best he could while trying to get away from Naruto at the same time. It was Naruto who conceded defeat, but only after they were a breathless heap on the floor. Minato smiled and shook his head fondly at the two's antics. According to Obito, they had never met before. He'd gotten this from Itachi himself. Yet here they were just like brothers, like they've known each other all their life. His own investigations into the case of Sasuke being a fraud were stinted. The clan had yet to come to him regarding their missing member, so any digging from his side would only lead them straight to Sasuke. If he was Sasuke, that is, at the moment there wasn't any reason to doubt him. He acted like a child, but most of all, he made Naruto happy, and no one was going to change that. Obito was poking around, but there wasn't much to go by at this point. They'd have to wait and see. Even Itachi hadn't been allowed in the interrogation room while the boy had been imprisoned. Obito hadn't asked Sasuke, but his mother had implied that he probably wouldn't know himself. Maybe she knew something and wasn't saying anything to protect her son. You could never tell with a woman with something to lose. With no reason to act just yet, Minato continued to watch his son with his friend. Looking at that blonde hair and blue eyes, there wasn't any doubt about the resemblance to him, but as far as he knew, he didn't have a son. Naruto had been picked from the hospital. The medic had promised him that it was an orphan. He wasn't able to ask any parent to sacrifice their child for such a thing. His thoughts wandered to Kushina and what they had had before everything fell apart. Naruto sure did have her spirit and her streak for pranks. He imagined that this would be their son if she had still been alive, and he had made it up to her for being a stupid idiot. Her free spirit had been wild, and she hadn't given a damn as to what people thought of her. Being born to happy parents had only made the lost keener when most of the Whirlpool shinobi had been wiped out. She grew up in harsh conditions, but she did like to whine somewhat harmlessly though. She had been a tough kunoichi, one of the best that he had ever had the privilege of meeting. Times had been rough. He was still new at being Hokage, and he had just lost Kakashi as well, his prized pupil. He had been lost in his own grief while he struggled to maintain order with a certain faction causing him to push her away. He never saw her after that. When he finally did remember, it was only to hear her name listed with the rest of the dead when Kyuubi attacked. There was just so much going on, but he regretted not shoving papers down someone's throat and punching somebody else aside so that he could go after her. He probably would always regret it. In the meantime, Obito stood by quietly. Minato hadn't responded to his inquiry. He saw that his former teacher had turned inward and was now lost among his memories. Judging by the look on his face and the fact that he was staring at Naruto, Obito could guess who he was thinking about. He liked Kushina. She was always up for a prank with him, and they always went against Kakashi. More often than not they lost, but they sure did have a lot of fun. He liked to believe that even Kakashi had a little bit of fun too. Now there was one soul that he didn't save in time, held to a dead family honor. He had never realized why Kakashi was the way he was until after his death. Everyone had their regrets, but he just wished like everyone else that he could have seen underneath the cold stares and the dislike of physical touch. What he had taken for arrogance was simply the only way the other had known to act with others, not his teacher. He had been envious once, he still was actually, of how relaxed and open Kakashi had been with Minato. It had always made his cold demeanor more pronounced when he had tried to do the same only to be rebuffed. Maybe if he had kept trying, it would have made a difference, and they wouldn't have been fighting with each other. And he blinked when an object flew toward his face. He dodged at the last second, much like Minato. The two unsupervised boys were grinning as they prepared to throw their other sandals at the adults. Pretty soon the office was turned into a chaotic chase as the nimble kids darted and raced around each other to get away from certain punishment. Those outside who could hear the shouting and the laughter either rolled their eyes or smiled along, long used to this kind of activity from their Hokage when Naruto was around. The days passed suspiciously without word from the Uchiha clan, yet with no incidents. Naruto and Sasuke began to forget about what had happened that hadn't happened but could still happen. It wasn't until a day where a series of underhanded schemes came to blossom that they were forcibly reminded that this wasn't how things had been for them. That is all, Hokage-sama. Thank you, Hawk, Minato replied with his fingers interlocked underneath his chin while he contemplated his next decision. The Uchiha clan had for the past year been exceptionally quiet. Ever since he had taken Sasuke under his wing, he hadn't heard more than a peep politically from them, which in itself was odd. The clan was always barging into council business and demanding this and that with their arrogant attitudes. Fugaku and he were not on friendly terms, especially due to the difference in opinion regarding Obito. Yet so far the man had managed to be civil to him the rare times that their paths crossed. ANBU reports contained little information regarding the clan actions as their meetings were held in secret with warded walls. It wasn't until 2 months ago that Uchiha Itachi had been inducted into ANBU. The boy had just recently taken over Toru's captain position of one of the squads. It was a big deal, especially when the boy was no more than 13 going on 14. To think, had Kakashi still been alive he would have been, well, as his former teacher, he would have never let Kakashi join ANBU, but that was beside the point. Itachi, despite his Uchiha upbringing, loved his little brother. Obito hadn't managed to keep the knowledge that Sasuke was staying with him secret from the other boy. Fugaku had advised his oldest son to relate ANBU activities to the clan while he was to do the same for Minato. Only once had Itachi joined ANBU had he finally been allowed into the clan meetings. According to his information though, the meetings were more of an announcement than any actual debate. The elder members with more power and influence made the decisions elsewhere and shared with the others at these weekly meetings. The most Itachi could do was report what was said. Now that they were planning on making their move, it was time for him to make his. He summoned the 4 captains of the individual offensive squads. As they all lined up and bowed before him, he relayed his plan to them. With an entire clan of shinobi as powerful as the Uchiha, a good majority of them wielding the Sharingan, it would be impossible to completely stop a full-out coup d'etat. With that in mind, Minato and several other members of the council had decided that their best chance was to strike before they could. As the 4 captains departed to relay the plan, he frowned in deep thought. The decision hadn't been an easy one, but it would spare the most lives. Theoretically, no lives would be lost if no one put up a fight. He had his reason to believe, though, that there would be no avoiding that tonight. It was a beautiful night, dark with no moon, yet the stars still shone as if they hadn't completely abandoned the world. Yet who they shone for was anyone's guess. He turned and looked out the window. Even now Naruto and Sasuke were asleep in bed. If everything went according to plan, they wouldn't be disturbed tonight. Sasuke for the most part had been an oblivious child, much like Naruto. Yet every now and then Minato or Obito would catch him with more than childish intelligence in those dark eyes. He had been especially observant when they were talking about the Uchiha clan. As such, he had seen to it that the 2 boys were not in the room whenever anything regarding the clan was mentioned. With thoughts of countering the coup on his mind along with his other load of daily duties, he hadn't been able to fully look into the issue of the boy. If he was an imposter, a year was a long time to bid one's time when in the form of a child. Not to mention Naruto was with the boy practically every hour of the day. Who could hold a jutsu for that long was beyond him. Despite the small naggings of suspicion, he had put it off day after day simply because every time he thought about taking Sasuke away he would hear Naruto's laughter. He would not be the one to cause misery to his little boy, not if he could help it. The door opened with one knock and Obito walked in. "We're ready," he said quietly. His eyes were solemn. Despite his dislike of the clan, he wasn't looking forward to this. Minato had offered him the option of opting out of the mission, yet he had adamantly refused and responded that he had to be there. "All right," the blonde responded, and he stood up. He hadn't been in actual fight for quite some time, but he was by no means rusty. Rarely did he ever wear his white coat into battle, but tonight was a night for it. The coat was a hassle the way it fluttered around him, but tonight it would stand for his position as Hokage and his duty to do what was best for the village. "Let's go," he spoke, his voice low but strong. They met each other's eyes, and in a swirl of leaves they disappeared. Aagag. The scream pierced the night, followed by several other screams seemingly from different parts of the compound. Obito froze in place as he was about to move out of the shadows of the room he had snuck into. Minato-sama hadn't given the signal yet. Had someone gotten caught? Obito wondered, but his time was brief as his target was startled awake and made an automatic grab for his kunai. He launched himself at the semi-conscious man and disarmed him with a sharp twist of his wrist. A hard blow to the man's temple stopped his struggling immediately. Obito dropped the man and left the room. As he made his way out the front, he could make out the distinctive sounds of fighting. What the hell had gone wrong? He heard more screams and he jumped to the roof. Across the compound he saw a flash of white. Minato looked like he was in hot pursuit of someone. Another quick glance around showed other ANBU fighting and trying to detain the Uchihas. It looked like they could handle themselves, so he made his way over the rooftops to catch up to the Hokage. Several rooftops later he lost sight of the white coat and stopped. 2 streets over though he froze when he heard Minato's voice. Obito jumped over quickly and moments later landed beside the yondaime. He eyed the dark figure opposite them with a critical eye. The man wasn't masked yet. Obito didn't recognize him. He had the features of an Uchiha though, the pale skin and black hair. In the shadow of his hair, he could make out the red glow of the activated Sharingan. The man lifted his face and merely smiled at the intrusion. He took a step back, the other 2 tensed in preparation to defend or give chase. "Ah, yondaime, how inconvenient. You should have died long ago. Those arrogant fools couldn't even pull that off," he taunted amusedly. "What are you talking about? Who are you?" Obito snarled. The man just laughed, and he casually lifted his bloodied katana. Minato glanced at the blade briefly but returned his gaze to the man's chin. The unknown man took another step back. "Unfortunately, I don't have time for you at the moment. Why don't you move along? After all, I am doing the village a favor tonight." With that he disappeared before their eyes. Obito jerked his head around looking for the mysterious man. Minato stood still as he concentrated on tracking down that chakra signature. It astounded him though how he seemed to be in multiple places at once. It was impossible. Aside from his Hiraishin, he knew of no other technique that could transport someone around with that much speed. Yet the man had vanished before just as fast. However he was doing it, the man was out to kill the Uchiha clan and Minato had to stop him. Sasuke woke up with a start. In his mind he could hear the screams and see the blood splatters along the floor and the walls. It was the Uchiha massacre all over again, albeit this time it was just a memory. He let out a breath and inhaled once more slowly. A snore to his left had him turning to face the sleeping moron in the bed a few feet away from him. Naruto slept oblivious to the world. Most days Sasuke wished he would stay just like that. Hell, he wished half the shit never happened to Naruto or him for that matter. However, lately he had been listening for news regarding his clan. The time for the massacre had long gone and passed with not so much as a sign as to it happening any time soon. It didn't help that the Yondaime had caught him listening too intently, and no longer mentioned anything about it. He hadn't seen Itachi in over a month either since his new promotion to captain. With the powerful fourth in charge, Sasuke wondered if the massacre would happen. Having been living with the man for the past year now with Naruto as well, he had deduced that the man wasn't easily influenced by political means and probably wouldn't make the same decision the third had made all those years ago that had changed his life forever. Minato was astute and keener than his easygoing demeanor let on. Sasuke had caught himself more than a few times over the years making mistakes and acting unchildlike. The man hadn't said anything yet. He was brought out of his wonderings when Naruto groaned and squirmed. The blonde mumbled something unintelligible, but Sasuke felt his chakra spike suddenly. It wasn't huge and wouldn't have been worth any investigation hadn't he recognized the chakra that was mixed in with Naruto's chakra. It was Kyuubi. He could never forget that red burning source of energy ever since he saw into Naruto's mind and witnessed the downplayed might of the caged fox. Cautious about what was going on, he tried to wake the other boy by calling his name. Naruto, Naruto. Still the blonde didn't wake. He kept murmuring and the frown on his face grew darker. Sasuke climbed out of his bed and carefully shook the blonde's shoulder, still calling his name. No! You can't! Naruto growled and struggled faintly. Sasuke shook him a little harder, but short of slapping him or dumping him on the ground, Naruto was not waking up. He didn't even think twice about leaving him alone to his nightmare. Naruto, wake up! He called out louder. Eyes snapped open and red gleamed up at the startled boy. Completely taken back, Sasuke could only stare down at the slitted eyes and the expression of hate on the blonde's face. Uchiha! It growled a moment before it leaped at Sasuke and pinned him to the floor. Red chakra was starting to seep from Naruto, and Sasuke struggled to throw the other boy off him. The red chakra burned and he tried adamantly to summon what little chakra he had to fend off the possessed boy. Naruto! Wake up! He shouted. Claws ripped into his tender flesh and pain tore through his shoulder as the other bit him hard. Sasuke struggled helplessly but to no avail. The Kyuubi-possessed Naruto jerked his head back suddenly as if yanked. He howled loudly and snarled down at Sasuke once more before in a giant leap, crashed out the window and into the night. Sasuke scrambled up fast as he could and ran to the window. The only sign he saw of Naruto was the red glow of chakra fading away over the rooftops. Naruto! He shouted, then gritted his teeth. He had to get the Yondaime. Pulling back, he dashed out of their room and slammed into the older man's room across the hall only to find it empty. Where the hell was he? Sasuke scrambled back to his room and launched himself out the window as well, automatically using chakra to leap from rooftop to rooftop. It wasn't long before he realized that Naruto was heading for his clan's compound. The closer he got, the more dread he felt. He could now hear the sounds of fighting and screaming. A child was crying for her mother while chaos reigned. Right in the middle, Naruto stood on a pole and let out an inhuman cry. The sound pierced everyone's concentration, dragging their attention to the small boy with the burning red chakra. Uchiha! The rough, hallowed voice of Kyuubi combined with Naruto's higher-pitched one was eerie and ominous. Silence reigned for the breathless moment after the cry before everyone sprung into action. Those that had lived through the horror of Kyuubi before scrambled and fled, dragging along others in their way. Sasuke knew exactly which Uchiha had Kyuubi riled up. He couldn't believe that he had forgotten that Madara had been here this night as well. Naruto! Obito had looked up just like everyone else only to see the little boy taken over by the fox demon. He had lost sight of Minato again, but now saw him racing toward his son. He prayed that the Hokage could get to the kid before anything happened. Show yourself! Kyuubi roared. His red eyes swept the compound looking for that one man. His hatred for the man was strong enough to traverse time itself. Now that he had a chance, he would take it. Red chakra began to leak out heavily. A large blob formed one tail and more quickly amassed and created the second. Naruto! Minato stopped a building short of his boy. Any closer and he could be attacked as well. It was easier to forget the results of his decision some days when all he can see and hear is the boy laughing. But like this, vulnerable and being used by the thing that is meant to protect him, Minato's heart clenched painfully. His little boy is staring at him with foreign eyes of hate, a look that he has never seen before. It doesn't belong to him at all. He wants nothing more than to hug his little boy and hold him close. Tell him that everything will be okay because he can make it okay. Wake up, son, it's me, he pleaded earnestly, hoping that the boy could hear him and do something about it. The only response to his plea was a harsh laugh. That brat isn't strong enough yet to fight me, he hissed. Where is that man? Uchiha Madara. I want to kill you slowly and slice you up and eat you alive for what you've done. Kyuubi jumped from the pole and landed hard on the roof of the next building, causing tiles and part of the roof to collapse. The demon jumped away before he would have fallen through as well. Naruto! Minato called out as he gave chase. Several ANBU tried to stop the fox, but with a whip of red chakra, 2 were sent flying with scorch marks on their uniforms and armor. A blast of chakra from his mouth sent the last one dodging into the air, only to be caught by a chakra claw and slammed into the ground. The sickening sound of breaking ribs could be heard, along with the gurgle of blood and air from the person's mouth as he went limp. 3 kunai flew toward the demon, but they were knocked aside by the red chakra. In a flash, Minato was there. He threw a punch which landed and knocked Kyuubi back a pace, but Minato teleported before the clawed hand could grab him. Stand back, he ordered before teleporting forward once more. The surrounding ninja reluctantly stood back, unable to help out. For as several moves this went on until the fourth pulled back and panted from the burns that he suffered. Kyuubi wasn't any worse for wear. He'd have to think of something fast, yet how do you seal a demon that's already technically sealed away? Naruto! A small voice called out. Too busy trying to find a way to stop Kyuubi, Minato hadn't noticed little Sasuke creeping closer and closer. He didn't know how the boy had gotten there, but one quick glance at the kid showed that he was already wounded. The boy was clutching his bleeding shoulder, and despite the pain he must have been feeling, there was no expression on his face. But standing there in the dark and looking so tiny, it astounded Minato when the demon turned to him and growled. "Dobe, what the hell are you doing?" Sasuke proceeded to ask in a dead voice. Kyuubi snarled and leapt at Sasuke. Minato jumped over and snatched the boy out of the way. Was the kid crazy? The boy struggled out of his arms expertly and dropped back onto the ground. The fourth made a grab for him, but he darted forward and headed straight for the demon. "Are you that weak?" he taunted the blonde boy, seemingly oblivious to the danger heading his way. "Sasuke! Get the hell out of here!" The fourth yelled as he made another close rescue before that red claw would slash the boy to ribbons. The swipe of the red claw tore chunks off the nearby wall as Kyuubi charged yet again, intent on killing Sasuke. "Hokage-sama!" Obito called out as he darted to his teacher's side. Minato threw the fighting Sasuke into the other man's arms and shoved him back. "Get him out of here!" he ordered, and rushed forward to meet an oncoming claw with a Rasengan. Obito darted off to the edge of the compound with the struggling boy in tow. He yelled at his cousin to let him go, but the man ignored him as he kept going, further and further away from Naruto. Damn it! He could snap the idiot out of it, they just had to give him the chance. Outside the compound, Obito practically threw the boy on the ground, and with a harsh order to stay put, he raced back inside, unwilling to let his teacher face off against that demon alone again. As soon as Obito was turned, Sasuke began making his way back. If there was a time for his Sharingan to activate, it would be now. Of course, he hadn't been training at all since becoming a kid again, and what little he could do exhausted him. The only times that he had ever been this frustrated were back in his Genin days when he wanted to kill Itachi so bad. When this was over, he was so going to train again. Speaking of his brother, where was he anyway? The compound was a mess with people running around and trying to escape. By now, the rest of the village was getting involved. Kyuubi wasn't exactly being subtle about his presence, and all the screaming had woken up the entire village. There were ninja everywhere, but nobody paid attention to the little boy going against the tide of panic. He gritted his teeth as he fought his way through. It'd be easier to take to the rooftops, but he had to conserve his chakra. In the meantime, his mind raced as he tried to think about what the hell just happened, what was still happening. Tonight would have been the night of the massacre, or at least some version of it, he was sure of that. Yet with the amount of ANBU here and the fourth himself being here, it wasn't the same as it was before. There didn't seem to be any order of annihilation, but one thing was for sure: Madara, that scheming bastard, was definitely here. If there was any doubt, Kyuubi wouldn't have gone crazy if he didn't know that the man was here in Konoha. Sasuke grunted as someone kneed him in the stomach in their hurry to leave. He shoved away from the person only to falter when an explosion rocked the area. Bright red light lit up the dark sky for a few heartbeats before fading away. If people hadn't been in a panic before, they were now. ANBU were urging people to leave or detaining others. Women and children screamed and cried in their haste. The boy plowed on. After what seemed like an eternity of people, he finally exited onto a street that was bare. Taking his chances, he went for it and started running faster. He could smell the smoke in the air from the explosion. The sounds of animalistic growls and fighting became louder, and he knew he was almost there. Sasuke burst from around a corner only to be assaulted by the burning heat of red chakra. It was painful and hard to breathe, like getting hit by a wall of fire. It took him a moment to orient himself and finally see Naruto crouched on all fours facing off against his father. The fourth was flashing all over the place. Sasuke couldn't make heads or tail of where he was. The only indication that he was there was the flash of the white coat here and there. Even still, it didn't seem like he was making any headway with Kyuubi. The entire area resembled a blast zone, with the building he was by quickly crumbling away to rubble. Whatever ninja that had been standing by before were now gone, leaving only the two blondes. He had to get Naruto's attention and pull him out of his mind. The boy had formed two tails, and it looked like a third one wanted to form, but Naruto's young body couldn't handle that much. It seemed Kyuubi knew that, yet it didn't stop it from trying though. He didn't have anything on him, No weapons or anything, not that it would help, but it would at least be a distraction. He settled for a piece of the crumbling building beside him. With a grunt, he heaved a chunk as hard as he could at the furious being. The chunk of concrete was whipped away by a flailing tail. Immediately following the tail, Kyuubi whipped its gaze onto Sasuke, and quicker than the boy had anticipated, it lunged at him. Not even close to his previous genin level, he darted to the side and ducked the swipe of the red chakra. A quick roll saved him from being crushed by a downward slash of a tail. A blow from the side had Kyuubi staggering, preventing him from stabbing the downed boy with the second tail. Sasuke looked up to see not the fourth but another man. There was no mistaking the long black mane and the posture of Madara. The appearance of the man didn't confuse Sasuke. He knew Madara wanted him alive. Yet the sight of him caused Kyuubi to go crazy. The fox went into a frenzied rage and charged with a bloodthirsty roar. Madara dodged several attempts to end his life, but all of a sudden things went still. Kyuubi stopped before he could start off on another lunge. Sasuke held his breath, but then he realized that Madara must have finally caught the fox with the Mangekyou. The man walked forward confidently and drew up his sword. "I have no use for you yet, fox," he announced as he got closer. Horror filled Sasuke as the thought of Madara killing or even hurting Naruto made it through his mind. The moment slowed down. Every step that Madara took brought him closer to Naruto, closer to hurting him. Kyuubi stood still, unable to defend himself. The fourth was nowhere in sight. Sasuke didn't even think. Next thing he knew, he could see. His hands flew automatically into the seals for the first fire jutsu that he learned. He exhaled and the ball of fire blew from his lips. Enormous and backed by the will of fire, it flew toward the man at an alarming speed. All Madara had time for was a glance over his shoulder before he jumped out of the way. Sasuke didn't have time to be relieved as he dashed over to Naruto's side. No longer held in a genjutsu, the boy fell over as the red chakra receded back into his body like it had never been. Sasuke's eyes darted around. When they landed on Madara a few yards away, he stood up in front of Naruto protectively. "You'll have to kill me if you want him," he growled at the older Uchiha. He knew damn well the other man wouldn't kill him or Naruto, but he wouldn't stand by and let him hurt them either. His Sharingan, only in its infant stage, still swirled dangerously as he glared defiantly at Madara. He laughed at the act the boy put up. "How courageous. At least there is still some genuine Uchiha blood in you," he sneered. Madara replaced his sword in his sheath and stepped back, but not before he murmured, "In time, my dear Sasuke." With those ominous words he disappeared into the night. Sasuke stood still for the next moment before he let out a breath. The wave of exhaustion suddenly overwhelmed him, and he felt the effects of using chakra that he barely had. The red glow of the Sharingan faded to black. He turned and looked at the unconscious Naruto. The boy's clothing was burned and scorched. Otherwise he was injury-free and blissfully unaware. His vision wavered. Suddenly the blonde hair and dirty white undershirt looked a lot closer than it was. Sasuke collapsed and landed in a heap on top of Naruto. He didn't see the fourth approach along with spare ninja. Minato had taken the distraction as a chance to move back and form another plan. He landed on the rooftop only to find to his dismay that the distraction had come from Sasuke. How the boy had gotten back there was beyond him. When Kyuubi had rushed him and the boy had managed to dodge, Minato held back. This was something else. Another clue or piece of the puzzle to Sasuke. The boy hadn't been fast, but his actions were that of a ninja. As far as he knew, the boy hadn't received any training yet. Just as he thought he would have to step in to save him, Madara appeared of all people to save the boy. Minato began forming thoughts. Why would Madara save a Sasuke when he was trying to kill the clan? Then Sasuke turned right around and defended Naruto. That wasn't a surprise, but the fire jutsu was, especially one of that size. He had seen the glow of the Sharingan in the boy's eyes, and the effortless way that he performed the seals to the jutsu left Minato reeling. With this, there was a lot more weight to the clan's investigation than ever before. He approached both unconscious boys slowly. Obito landed behind him and voiced his apology. Minato waved it off as he bent down and picked Sasuke off Naruto carefully. The boy's shoulder wound was still bleeding sluggishly. He groaned when Minato lifted him and handed him over to Obito. He then picked up Naruto as well. He handed Naruto to another ninja, Izumo, and turned to look at Obito. "Take them to the hospital. Don't leave either of them alone," he ordered. With things like they were, he didn't trust anyone alone with Naruto, and he couldn't leave Sasuke either. "Obito, keep them together and don't let them out of your sight," he added. "Yes, sir." The man nodded and the two ninja jumped up and away in their haste to get to the hospital. Minato looked at the carnage around him before he took a breath and started issuing orders to contain the mayhem. What was supposed to be a well-planned night turned into a complete nightmare. He didn't know what the hell was going on at all. It had just turned into the longest night of his life. It was 4 in the morning the next day. Obito was still on guard duty over the two unconscious boys. The village was in an uproar. The fear of Kyuubi returning had made panicked villagers and shinobi rally the Hokage to kill the demon brat. In the messy aftermath, the Uchiha coup was shoved aside as a result of Kyuubi's rampage rather than the cause. Minato was up over his eyeballs in protests and frantic council members. People had been pressing him, demanding him to take immediate action against the demon. Already there had been an attempt on Naruto's life. Several ANBU had been dispatched to guard the surrounding area. They were in fact no longer in the hospital but Obito's apartment. The two boys had been secretly moved here a day ago after the incident. So far no one had bothered them here, but it was only a matter of time. He wasn't sure how Minato was going to handle this mess, but whatever he had to do, Obito knew that Minato would never let anything happen to Naruto. His gaze landed on his young cousin. His eyes studied the closed lids that trembled slightly from a dream. He hadn't seen everything, but he had gotten back in time to see Sasuke standing up to the unknown man. The boy's behavior was definitely odd, no doubt about it. As soon as things settled down just enough, Minato and he were going to have a word with him. Naruto as well. Minato might not have noticed it or simply brushed it off because he refused to see anything wrong with Naruto, but Obito had noticed on more than one occasion the strange actions and choices of words that Naruto used. He looked over to Naruto, who was sleeping on the other side of the bed with his face turned away. There wasn't any genjutsu that he or Minato had been able to break, and the chakra signatures were indeed Naruto's and Sasuke's. Yet there was just something off. All his searching and snooping had been fruitless, and spying on the two boys revealed nothing either. There wasn't anything that condemned them physically, yet the feeling was there. But they were just kids, right? What could kids do? That thought led to Kakashi, the man that never really had a chance to be a kid. Funny how he kept referring to him as a man. Kakashi had been a prodigy of his time. The boy had made Chunin at the tender age of 6 and had been a jounin for several months before that mission. He had only recently celebrated his 12th before he had made that promotion. Almost 2 years older, Obito could remember being rather jealous of the younger boy. With his level of skill, Kakashi had been taking undercover missions as soon as he had made Chunin rank. After all, who would suspect a child of being capable of killing? He'd been damn good at it too. Obito let out a sigh. It didn't help his suspicions at all thinking about Kakashi. He turned his attention to the door when he heard the fast pacing shortly before it swung open and Minato stalked in. The look on his face was murderous. The younger man remained silent, knowing that an angry Minato needed time to cool down before he even thought about bringing attention to himself. He watched silently as the blonde paced angrily to the window and gripped the inner ledge. The wood groaned under the strain. Several deep breaths later, the man finally turned his attention to his sleeping son. The earlier look of fury was replaced by something Obito had a hard time describing. It was the look of a parent, so filled with love and at the same time a fierce determination to protect their child. He almost felt like he was intruding, but just as the urge to leave nearly overwhelmed him, Minato spoke. "How are they?" "Naruto is fine and Sasuke will be sore from his burns and his wound, but he should be fine as well with a few more days of rest." Minato looked over Sasuke. He inspected the pale boy for a moment before he let out a sigh. He moved back from the bed and found a chair to sit back on. He looked tired. Obito wouldn't doubt it. Things weren't looking good at all. "What do you think?" "I think they should go fuck themselves," he said with a straight face, then added, "and maybe roll over and die in the process too." Minato chuckled briefly. Oh, how he had wished the same thing so many times as well. The tension that he had been feeling melted a bit more. "What do you think of Sasuke?" he asked, this time with more clarification of who he was talking about. "I think there's a basis to the clan's actions. There's something slightly off with him. I didn't see most of what he did that night, but the fact that he was there at all is something to think about. Not to mention, from what Itachi told me, Sasuke hasn't had any ninja training yet. The morning he was captured he had rather skillfully attacked them. Not too many people know what happened to him when they locked him up. Even his mom doesn't know what they did to him when she managed to sneak him out a week later. What they learned from him Itachi couldn't find out. With other little aspects of his behavior up till now, I'd say it's about time we asked him our own questions." "The same goes for Naruto," Obito finished solemnly. At that last statement, Minato raised his brows. "Naruto? Yeah, it's not so obvious with him, but he's been acting like Sasuke too. Every now and then I'll catch him saying things that he can't possibly know about. He especially acts weird when I mention certain people. He'll catch himself saying something, almost as if he knows them well when, well, they've never met. Which brings to mind about how he knows Sasuke. According to Itachi, Sasuke has never left the clan compound before, at least to his knowledge. Fugaku doesn't bring him out to the station on business, and Mikoto hardly ever leaves the compound herself." He looked at his sleeping cousin, yet when I mentioned Naruto offhandedly he instantly knew who Naruto was. Naruto immediately who he was too. All this Minato already knew. There wasn't much that got by him, he just didn't want to hear it spoken out loud as they mirrored his thoughts in the last months. Having Naruto as a son meant more than the world to him, and to even consider the suspicion that the little blonde sunshine was a fraud was something he couldn't stomach. He scooted his chair forward and placed a hand on the boy's head. Gently he stroked the soft, unruly spikes. What to do? The council had demanded a thorough explanation of what had happened. After the retelling of the events, they had demanded to know what he would do with the demon. Their concern wasn't unfounded. The mystery of the Uchiha man would be investigated, yet the fact that the demon fox had managed to even show that level of control over the boy had alarmed them. They wanted to know the details. Had the seal somehow been destroyed or compromised? Minato had assuaged their fears that the seal was indeed intact. going into brief detail that the seal allowed for the demon chakra to slowly mix in with Naruto's chakra over time. It was only due to the stress level and the fox's fury at the unknown man that had allowed for the fox to overpower Naruto's will. That explanation had gotten them all into a debate about the strength of Naruto's will and if it would be strong enough to handle future complications. The meeting had not ended well and he had stormed off in a foul mood. With a heavy heart, he had agreed to have Naruto be placed in lockdown until he could be deemed safe. He had only agreed because Naruto would be kept at home and he would supervise the evaluation. As for the Uchiha that had been captured, they would be placed on trial once a case had been formally declared against them. Unfortunately, during the chaos, several key members of the clan and the ones planning the coup had managed to escape. There were ninja out now searching the village for them. Minato couldn't care less if they were brought back dead or alive, but for the sake of a trial they were needed more or less alive. One of the Uchiha that had escaped was none other than Sasuke's father, Fugaku. It would be beneficial to have him brought back alive. The blonde man sighed again. He was feeling so old already. With the war between Rock and Leaf over, he thought that perhaps there would be peace. But one thing after another just kept popping up. Bring both boys to my place. I'll have them questioned when they're conscious, he said before he stood up and stretched. He still had much to do. I'll stop by shortly to reinforce the house seals. Obito nodded and stood up. You should get some sleep, Minato, he suggested to the other man. Said Blonde merely shrugged a shoulder and made his way to the door. I can't sleep just yet. You should go now before the sun comes up, he said before he opened the door and stepped out, shutting it quietly behind him. Obito let out his own sigh when the Hokage left, and he carefully picked up one boy and then the other. With the genjutsu cloaking them, he was soon on his way to the Hokage manor. Sasuke woke up to silence. A wayward thought registered in his mind that something was wrong. He never woke to silence, not since he slept in the same room with Naruto. The boy snored horribly on some nights, but if he wasn't snoring then he was either moving about in his sleep or talking. Even in his slumber the blonde couldn't be quiet. Sasuke opened one eye sleepily. Damn, he was tired. His other eye opened reluctantly, and they fell onto an empty bed across the room. Naruto wasn't in his bed. Then his memory kicked him in the guts and he practically fell out of his bed as he called out for Naruto. The instantaneous fear that Madara had decided to come back and take him away made his stomach clench and his legs weak. He grasped the bed and struggled to get up but only successfully fell onto it. He struggled to even his breathing. He felt so weak. His limbs shook as he hauled himself upright on the bed. His commotion had brought about the attention of his guard. The door opened and Izumo poked his head in to find the little boy breathing hard and paler than usual. The moment Sasuke spotted the man, he knew Izumo from all the time he spent in the tower with Naruto and the Hokage. He shot off his question. He just had to know. Where's Naruto? Calm down, Sasuke-kun. Izumo came into the room slowly. Just lie down, okay? Everything's okay. Sasuke shook his head and demanded to know where Naruto was again. The man knelt down by the bed and tried to get Sasuke to lie down. The pale boy jerked back and glared at him. Where is Naruto? He shouted, hysteria creeping into his voice. The man held up his hands non-threateningly as he leaned away from the panicked boy. Listen, Sasuke-kun, can you calm down for me? He asked gently, but Sasuke wasn't having any of it. He had lost Naruto once, and he wasn't going to lose him again. Especially not to Madara. That man was going to pay if he so much as touched a hair on Naruto's head. He couldn't explain his panic, only that if he didn't see Naruto soon he was going to fully freak out. No! Where is he? Sasuke bucked and kicked and clawed at the man when he tried to envelop him in a hold. It was a loud, messy struggle as he screamed and shouted at the man to let him go. His breathing hitched and he began hyperventilating. Izumo was starting to really consider knocking the kid out when his thoughts were interrupted. What's going on here? In their struggle the two hadn't noticed Obito's rushed entrance. As soon as he felt Sasuke's meager chakra flare he had darted into the house. At the sound of Sasuke's screams he couldn't get to the room fast enough and cursed that he couldn't just flash into the room like Minato. Obito-senpai! Izumo called out helplessly as he struggled to get a hold of the still squirming boy. Sasuke had noticed his cousin and had started shouting for him. Let him go! Obito ordered and he darted forward and caught the boy who had leapt into his arms as soon as Izumo had let him go. Sasuke clung to him tightly. His tiny frame was shaking. He was crying and it soon morphed into sobs as he cried for Naruto. Obito hugged him and rubbed his back soothingly. The other man stood up awkwardly unsure of what to do. It took a few moments but soon Sasuke was just hiccuping. Obito looked at Izumo questioningly, and the older man shrugged. I heard a thump and I came in to find him panicky and demanding to know where Naruto was. I tried to calm him down but it just got worse, he finished lamely. Obito nodded. Sasuke was a strange kid, he didn't like many other people touching him at all and went out of his way sometimes to avoid it from those he didn't know well, which was pretty much everyone that wasn't Naruto, Minato or himself. You can take a break, I'll take care of him, he offered the other man who nodded and saluted him before he exited the room. Obito sat down on Sasuke's bed and eased the boy onto his lap so that he could look at him. Sasuke? He asked gently. The boy looked up at him. His face was open and pleading with tear stains. Where's Naruto? Obito almost couldn't take that look. Hell, he didn't think Sasuke was faking such concern. How was he supposed to tell the boy that his best friend had been kidnapped? The two were hardly ever apart, and if they were, never for more than a few minutes before the other got nervous and twitchy. When Minato had told him to take the two boys to the manor, he had done so thinking that the genjutsu would be enough to prevent anyone from following him. The only ones that would easily see through the cloak would have been someone with a Sharingan. Little had he known that the ones who had seen through it were the escaped Uchihas themselves. Overtaken and totally surprised, the five had overwhelmed him long enough to steal Naruto. Two of the five had made an attempt for Sasuke, but the two ANBU guards following behind had caught up, causing them to drop their attempt and flee after the ones who had already taken Naruto. He had given Sasuke to the rabbit ANBU with a harsh order to get the Hokage and dashed off after them. The other ANBU had detained the two Uchihas in battle. Obito left them behind. Oh god, what the hell was Minato going to do if he didn't get Naruto back? He chased them turn for turn with his Sharingan blazing. It was into the clan compound that they were headed for. Obito knew that if he didn't catch up to them before that they were going to get away. Inside the compound were countless secret passages and rooms that they could escape through or hide in. He hadn't been privileged to know where most of the passages were. The thought that they had most likely used these secrets to stay hidden burned his mind. He was going to burn that place down when he had the chance. Just as he turned a corner building perilously close to the compound, he saw the forms dash over the clan wall, and his heart sunk. Determination surged through him. He couldn't give up yet. 2 minutes later, though, he was left standing before a door that they had passed through. He had tried several fire jutsus, but to no avail. The door wouldn't budge. He didn't want to do any earth jutsus as it might collapse the tunnel or room behind the door. His eyes scanned the door and surrounding area, but without the knowledge of what to look for, he was helpless. He let out a frustrated scream and pounded the unmoving door. Minato had showed up shortly after. He briefly looked at the pale man, and he ordered him to step back. Obito quickly scrambled away. He knew from the chakra being gathered what Minato was about to do. Bang! One Rasengan later, the door exploded into chunks and debris, and before Obito could even warn him about traps, Minato was already moving in. Keep an eye on Sasuke, was the last thing Obito had heard from him. The order tore him apart inside. He had failed to keep Naruto safe, but he could still see to Sasuke. Yet he couldn't just let Minato follow behind them blindly, much less go by himself. I can't let you go by yourself. Disregarding his former teacher's order, he darted in after him. They couldn't lose Sasuke, but damn if he was going to abandon his Hokage. The search had been long and fruitless. It had been a dangerous maze of traps and dead ends. With Obito's Sharingan, they were able to avoid setting off most of the traps, but after half an hour of searching, they had come to another dead end after exhausting all the other pathways. Frustrated and more than terrified for his son's safety in his kidnapper's hands, Minato had made for the tower to organize a search party. He once again ordered Obito to look after Sasuke. Obito had returned to the manor only to find Sasuke in the state that he was currently in. The older Uchiha patted Sasuke's head, smoothing down some wild spikes in the back before they sprung right back up. Naruto's not here right now, he said carefully. He watched Sasuke's face freeze up in fear. He wondered how a boy could know such fear. The boy's grip tightened on his flak jacket vest. What do you mean? The child whispered, where is he? Who took him? His voice grew in volume with each question. Obito puzzled over the boy's choice of words. This was probably a good time to get some answers. I never said anyone took him. He gauged the boy's reaction. To his surprise, Sasuke didn't stammer or back down. The look of fear had disappeared, only to be replaced by a serious, apprehensive gaze. Someone took him, he insisted. The boy started to push away in an attempt to get away. His eyes were distant with deep thoughts. Madara, that bastard had taken Naruto after all. He cursed silently at how weak he was, how he had been so complacent with Naruto and the fourth year. He had forgotten the cunning of that man. What do you know, Sasuke? Obito pressed, drawing the boy's attention back to his cousin. Sasuke blinked and stopped pushing at the man whose lap he was still sitting on. Could he do it? What would his cousin think? They were already suspicious of him, and this would only add to it. Hell, the way he had acted last night was a dead giveaway that he wasn't merely a kid. He could do it. For Naruto's sake, he had to. Only he knew about Madara and his treacherous plans. He was too young and powerless to stop the man, but maybe Obito and the Yondaime could. The man wouldn't gain enough strength until much later, and even still he was merely a shadow of what he used to be according to the Itachi that he knew. Who took him? Sasuke asked again. Obito stared down at those black eyes, so similar to his own, yet the serious look that had entered them was no longer the look of a child but someone older. The man contemplated on how much he should reveal, but sometimes you had to give in order to receive, and at the moment it looked like Sasuke was willing to give. Your father. Sasuke's eyes widened in surprise. He wasn't expecting that at all. So Madara hadn't kidnapped Naruto? His father had? What the hell was going on? Things were going so wrong. First Kakashi is dead and the fourth is alive. Itachi doesn't murder the clan and Madara appears early, and now Naruto had been kidnapped by his father. The vow that he had made when he had been imprisoned came back to his mind. He wasn't supposed to make any stupid choices, yet all along he had chosen the easy way out. By not doing anything he had let these things happen. What would it be like if he had done something, anything? Sasuke? Obito asked when it seemed Sasuke wouldn't be answering any time soon as he was so lost in thought. The boy blinked up at his cousin. It seemed at once that he made up his mind. Where did they go? Deciding to play along, Obito answered that they had taken one of the passages in the compound. His brows furrowed and Sasuke asked which one. Obito described the building and the surrounding area of the compound. He even described Minato's and his attempt to follow. Quick as a cat, Sasuke's gaze narrowed and he demanded, "How long ago?" "Half-hour ago," Obito responded, to which Sasuke swore loudly. He didn't care anymore. Obito was more curious now than ever. Just what the hell did Sasuke know that Itachi didn't know? Who the hell was this kid really? They'll be well south of the village by now. He cried out and jumped off the man's lap suddenly in his distress. Alarmed, Obito stood up as well. "How do you know?" he demanded. "It doesn't matter right now," he snapped as he went for the door. "We need to get to Naruto now." Before he could get to the doorknob, Obito grabbed his arm. "Where do you think you're going? Who else would know where they could be?" He argued back and tried to yank his arm out of the man's grip. "Let go of me." He glared coldly at his cousin, and Obito was once again struck by how unchildlike the boy was behaving. Every second we waste could mean more harm to Naruto, he reasoned. Obito reluctantly loosened his hold, but he didn't let go. He would take this to Minato. "Come on then," the man muttered before he scooped the boy onto his back, and they headed for the tower to find the blonde boy's father. The sudden feeling of falling jerked Naruto awake faster than his father's attempts to drown him in the mornings to get him out of bed. He found himself bouncing along on someone's shoulder as they jumped down from the high branches of a tree. It took several moments to orient himself, as he was suddenly flipped over and thrown onto the ground. "Ow," he groaned at the sting of being dropped 5 or more feet onto the hard forest floor. He looked up at the man through the dim light. It looked like the sun was either setting or rising, but there was enough light that he recognized the pale features and dark eyes as any Uchiha. What the heck was going on? The last thing he remembered was throwing a pillow at Sasuke for saying something mean, then dozing off to sleep. The man above him didn't look friendly, and movement from the other side of a tree to his left showed that the man wasn't alone. "We can't stop yet," another man growled from further away. "He'll find us if we stop here." Naruto couldn't see this man, nor did he recognize the voice. He didn't need to think too hard to guess that they were talking about his dad. Who were these guys and what were they doing running off with him? "We lost them in the tunnels. They won't know where to find us," the man by the tree argued. The angry man stepped out of the bushes and Naruto saw his face. "With that man you can never be too careful," he snapped. "Get him. Let's keep moving." Wordlessly, the man who had been carrying him bent down to hoist him onto his shoulder again. Instinctively, Naruto kicked out with all his might and chakra just as the man's face was close enough. The kick took the man by surprise. He was dead even before he could let out more than a groan, as his nose was shattered and the cartilage lodged itself in his brain. Naruto scrambled out of the way as the man fell forward in an unmoving heap. "What the hell?" the complaining man cried out in surprise as Naruto stood up and faced the 2 remaining men. "Demon!" the angry man hissed, and the Sharingan blazed to life in his once black eyes. "Shit!" Naruto avoided his gaze, an ingrained habit learned from fighting Itachi. The other man rushed him, fist drawn back, ready to beat the demon brat down. Everything had gone wrong because of the stupid demon. And now he dared to take another life? Naruto ducked under the fist and slammed his own chakra-powered head into the man's wide-open chin. He knew he had a hard skull, and he proved it so when he heard the sickening crack of bone. The man screamed hoarsely as he clutched his shattered jaw. There was no time to delve on his satisfaction as he jumped back to avoid the kick that would have knocked his head off had it connected. He growled at the last man, who stood back and regarded him coolly. "So, it is true then," he muttered seemingly to himself, but Naruto heard him nonetheless. "What are you talking about? And who the hell are you?" Naruto demanded. He held himself tensely, warily waiting and preparing for an attack from the man. The man didn't answer him. The morning light continued to grow, and a quick glance from his peripheral vision told him that they were in Konoha's forests. The trees loomed out majestically with its branches high up and large enough to travel upon. Where he was exactly he didn't know though. The man lunged and Naruto dodged, his chakra flaring to increase his speed to match the man. Several more lunges were met with equal speed and dodging. Finally the man stood back and growled out, "You don't deserve Sasuke, demon." The words confused Naruto. This man knew Sasuke? Well, obviously he was an Uchiha, and every Uchiha seemed to know Sasuke. "Stay away from my son!" The man charged once more. Naruto was knocked back by the sheer ferocity of the attack. It didn't take long though before his own anger flared. No one told him what to do. Hell, no one told him to stay away from Sasuke either. If he didn't listen to the perverted hermit, then he sure as hell wasn't going to listen to this man. "Don't tell me what to do! And I'm not going to stay away from Sasuke." Angry, he charged in with his own attack. Quick hand seals created a shadow clone to his left. Immediately the clone began what he had been created for. The form of the infamous Rasengan was formed to the other man's surprise. "How do you know that?" He demanded a second before Naruto's clone was dispelled, and he charged the man with a cry of Rasengan. With the Sharingan, the attack was easily dodged. The tree previously behind him groaned under the force of the attack before it shattered and splintered. The unfortunate man with the broken jaw didn't jump away fast enough to escape the slew of wooden shrapnel. Enough of this! The man barked, and he lunged at Naruto once more, faster than before. It seemed he had been going easy on the boy earlier, as now Naruto couldn't keep up. A punch sent him stumbling to the ground, followed by a vicious kick to his stomach. Naruto gagged from the blow, the wind completely knocked from him. Before he could even recover, the man grabbed him and hauled him up by his hair. He cried out in pain as the man twisted his grip. He kicked out, but a punch to face stunned him. The man yanked his head forward and his nose connected with the man's knee. Pain exploded in his face. He felt his nose shatter painfully even as a fistful of his hair was wrenched out when the man tossed him to the side. Naruto landed on his back on the ground. He struggled to breathe through his mouth as blood covered his face both from his nose and from his torn scalp. A gurgled scream was ripped from him as the man stepped on his hand and ground it viciously into the hard ground. "You're disgusting, parading around like you have the right to live," the man spat down at him. A brutal kick to the boy's side followed the scathing remark. Naruto cried out in pain once more before he clamped his mouth shut and did his best to glare up at the man. Another harder kick was delivered to his tender side, breaking a rib. Naruto almost couldn't hold in his scream. The man followed the kick with more words, but Naruto had ceased to hear what the man was saying. Kyuubi, only recently shoved back into his cage, was roused to action by the man. It wasn't Madara, but it was still an Uchiha. Any Uchiha was despicable in its eyes. Menacingly red chakra began flooding the boy's chakra system. Caught up in his anger, the man noticed too late the red clouded eyes and the animalistic growl. A burst of burning chakra sent the man flying back. He caught himself on a tree and swore. He had taken too long. He chastised himself for letting his anger get the better of him. Kyuubi growled as it crouched ready to pounce and rip the Uchiha to shreds and drink its blood. Minato's heart skipped a beat when he felt the flare from the south, just as Sasuke said. They were already heading in that direction. It wouldn't be too long now before he reached his little boy. Faster than most shinobi even without his Hirishin, Minato pulled ahead of everyone else. He pushed himself to go even faster when the familiar feel of the red chakra pulsed from the forest. The scream he heard only served to hasten him even more. Naruto. Oh God, he hoped he wouldn't be too late. Please, just a little bit more. Please be okay, Naruto. Minato prayed fervently in his mind. The images of what could be going on at the moment terrified him. When Obito had summoned him with the three-pronged kunai, he had been hopeful, then instantly irritated when he found himself inside the tower. His irritation instantly turned to hope once more as Sasuke, who wasn't Sasuke, said that Naruto was south of the village. With only a look at Obito for confirmation, he had teleported to the southern gate, and from there took off. The sun was already rising, and with every ray that illuminated the sky, Minato had the sinking feeling that he wouldn't be there in time to stop anything from happening. There. He jumped down to the forest floor to catch a glimpse of a body go crashing into a tree. The body fell into a bloody heap, but it coughed and sat up against the tree, revealing itself to be none other than Fugaku. Minato saw red. That man. Then he really did see red as Kyuubi pounced on the man. He didn't stand a chance as the claws slashed through his flesh like a warm knife through soft butter. Naruto! Minato shouted. He couldn't care less that Fugaku was getting his just desserts, but he was needed somewhat alive. Red eyes turned to him, and the demon snarled with no trace of his son in that gaze. It didn't step away from the broken, bleeding man, though. Instead, it waited. Minato stood back even as he tried to bring his son back. Knowing there really was no way to successfully defeat the fox even in this state, he waited as well. Moments of fear and tension ticked by when Minato felt the others catching up. He felt Obito's chakra along with a few others. Sasuke's was among them. Fugaku sputtered and muttered something even though he was growing weaker by the moment from blood loss. The others came crashing through the trees with Sasuke clinging onto Obito. When he saw Naruto, he jumped off and ran straight for him. Sasuke! Obito shouted at the boy as he made a grab for the boy. Too late. Kyuubi laughed and shifted its body so that Sasuke could see the source of the blood. Sasuke, came the weak voice of his father. The pale boy froze in his tracks at the sound and sight of his father. He was battered and his chest and stomach looked like half-grounded raw beef. Blood oozed from him, and the puddle beneath him was growing bigger by the second. Father? He gasped out. That night flashed before his eyes again. There was blood everywhere, on the walls, on the mats, on his mother, on his father, on his brother, and his sword on him. He shook his head. No, it couldn't be happening again. Itachi wasn't here. Kyuubi was here. The demon chuckled with the double voice of a low growl and Naruto's voice. Sasuke's eyes snapped to red ones filled with smug satisfaction. Why was it so damned happy? I was waiting just for you, it purred. Sasuke was confused. Hell, everyone was confused. They all stood by unsure of what the fox demon was planning. Kyuubi leaned down toward the dying man and ran a claw almost loving across the man's bloody cheek. With no strength left, the man could do nothing. Sasuke couldn't take the way that the demon was touching his father. He hated it. He hated the way it smiled. Get away from him! He shouted. Naruto! Fight him! Minato yelled. Inwardly Sasuke had the same fleeting thought. The fox's gaze slid slyly over to the Hokage, and it snickered. Don't be impatient. You'll have your son back in just a moment, it purred and turned its eyes back to Sasuke. For you, Uchiha Sasuke, for the way it really was. Sasuke screamed as the fox's meaning dawned on him, and he lunged forward only to finally be caught by Obito. The demon's clawed hand that had been stroking the man's cheek had gripped the man's face and forced it upward. His teeth sank into the soft flesh of Fugaka's neck, and with no more effort than it took to turn his head, he ripped the man's throat out. With all the blood lost, nothing more happened than a spray of blood that spurted briefly before it stopped to a slow drip. The body fell sideways with a thump, its neck sporting a gaping, crude fleshy hole. The fox spat out the chunk of flesh and grinned at them, showing off the bloody canines. Obito wanted to puke. The cruel laugh of the fox sounded throughout the forest, and it rang eerily about until it died down, and the red chakra disappeared, leaving behind the blood-covered host who promptly slumped over unconscious. Sasuke had frozen when Kyuubi had ripped his father's throat out. Something kept him immobile and unable to help his dying father. But as silence filled the forest, he seemed to snap, and his sudden jerk freed him from Obito's grasp. He fell upon his father's still form. Someone was screaming and crying, but all he felt inside was disbelief. His father wasn't supposed to die. The massacre didn't happen. Itachi didn't kill anyone. Someone pulled at him, but he tore free as he clung to his father. He vaguely realized that he might be the one screaming. No, 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 no. It wasn't supposed to happen this way. Voices ran around him, but he ignored them. Hands grabbed at him, but he jerked away. How could they take him away from his father? I thought it wouldn't happen. It wasn't supposed to happen. The boy sobbed, and his vision immediately blurred. The voices around him were distorted. Sasuke, no, Itachi was dead. He couldn't be talking to him. Yet he looked up, and there was his brother standing before him. The light behind his brother's form hurt his eyes. He heard his brother say something, but he shook his head. No! You're dead. I killed you. Just like you killed father and mother. He refused the image of his brother, but he couldn't look away. The last thing he saw was his father's gaping neck and lifeless face before everything went dark. Sasuke, let me out of here, you damned stupid fox! Naruto shouted up at the ceilings of the sewer that made up the prison maze that housed the demon. He had felt the pain fade away when the fox chakra had begun consuming him. Too weak to stop the flow, he had been slowly forced into the sewer, and held there against his will. What was worse, he could hear it. For once in his life, Naruto was aware of what the fox was doing while it took over his body. He couldn't see, but the sounds of that double-voiced laughter intermittent with screams scared the shit out of him. He could hear what the demon was saying, and it chilled him to the bone. He wasn't sure if not seeing anything could be considered a blessing when his overactive imagination was working overtime, letting him know exactly what could be going on. Whatever Kyuubi was doing using his body, that man sure as hell wasn't going to die painlessly. After a while he kept his shouting to a minimum, but the moment he heard his father, his screaming and shouting increased once more. He had to get out. He started running once more, as if that would lead him to, and the fox suddenly stopped. And Naruto slowed to a stop as he realized why. Fear seized at his heart, and his breathing stopped. No, don't come here. He couldn't breathe as his lungs refused to work and his legs stiffened and locked up. He could feel Sasuke. For the longest time nothing happened. Naruto counted the harsh gurgling breaths of the dying man, he being Sasuke's father according to the fox. He could sense his own father, but no one was moving except for the group that was fast approaching. The boy was close by, and before he knew it there was a commotion. Obito was there, and some other vaguely familiar chakra signatures, but he couldn't take the time to decipher just who they were. His senses were drawn to the still boy standing not too far away. Oh God, what was going on? He heard his father telling him to fight the fox. What the hell did they think he was doing? He didn't know of any way to really get control back, it just happened. He shouted at the walls some more, and he missed what was said, but the next words caught his immediate attention. Kyuubi spoke clearly. For you, Uchiha Sasuke, for the way it really was. Sasuke screamed, and Naruto fell forward as his stomach revolted and he lost whatever meager contents there were inside. Clutching at his heaving sides, he was so cold. He had heard the fleshy sound, and for a second there he had smelled and tasted the warm blood. This couldn't be happening. This can't be happening. This can't be happening. The mantra repeated itself several times in his head before he shouted it out loud to the cold, damp walls. This can't be happening. Kyuubi! His wail fell on deaf ears. Naruto curled up and hugged his knees. He hadn't spoken to Kyuubi yet in this time, but from the fox's words he knew that Kyuubi knew. They were connected, intertwined. Whatever happened to one happened to the other. The demon must have come back into the past with him as well. How else would he know? Naruto had to get out. Whatever he did, he had to get out of here. Let me out! Stupid fox! He shouted and stood up. Determined to get out, he started running again. Whatever had happened outside was bad, and he needed to get out. The need was so great that he just couldn't think of anything else at the moment. It powered his legs into running. He ran hard and fast and made his way back to the looming gates of the cage where the demon was supposed to be. The fox was there, golden eyes gleaming with amusement. As Naruto entered the chamber, it loomed forward of the gates and chuckled. "About time you came down here," it spoke with a deep rumble. Naruto snarled at it. "What the hell, you stupid fox? What the fuck do you think you're doing? Let me out!" he shouted at the demon. Kyuubi laughed and regarded the raging smaller human before him. "I just saved your life, brat. Be a little bit more grateful," it chided. It must have been in a good mood to not snap and growl immediately like it usually did. Naruto didn't care. He didn't give a damn about the demon's moods. "You don't give a shit about me," he shouted with an accusing finger at the chakra form. The fox ignored the outburst and tilted its head. "Don't you want to know?" Naruto crossed his arms over his chest. Yes, he did want to know, but he'd be damned 3 times over before he admitted that to the fox. The stupid thing would gloat over this forever. "No, what?" he snapped. The demon laughed at the boy's pretense. It decided it wouldn't tell unless the human gave in and asked. Then it would see if it felt like telling it what had happened. So instead it changed the subject. "You and that pesky Uchiha have caused so much trouble," the demon chuckled. "The two of you together caused more chaos and destruction than me." Naruto failed to see what was so amusing. "And that wasn't true at all, us. It's all because of you. If it weren't for you, everything would be fine. It's because of you that my father died. That Sasuke went against Konoha. It's you that..." "Me?" It laughed again, interrupting the human's rant. "Of course I was there, and all I had to do was one thing that I'm good at. And you two did all the rest. I haven't had this much fun in a while. Thanks to you and that brat, I'll actually get a chance to kill that man and free myself." "What are you talking about? You can't free yourself." Naruto didn't like where this conversation was going. Kyuubi definitely had come back to the past with him, and it seemed stronger than before. And how the hell was it planning on freeing itself? As if it could read his mind, or in this case the bewildered expression on the human's face, the fox decided to enlighten it. "Just think, that human is alive in this time. What would he do to keep his precious son when he finds out that he had already lost him in another life?" the demon taunted. Dread-filled Naruto. He hadn't thought of that. No way was he gonna let Kyuubi blurt out something like that. He wasn't going to let his father choose again, not if he could help it. "I won't let you!" That was final. He had to stop talking to the damn fox. He was filling his head with doubts and fears that he didn't need. With a surge of will, he forced Kyuubi back into its cage. It wasn't so much as forcing but Kyuubi drawing back. The seal glowed briefly in the dark and he could no longer see the red chakra of the demon, but Naruto could still hear its haunting laughter. "Stupid fox, by the founding of the Council of Konoha, you, Uchiha Shursui, are found guilty of high treason, for planning and aiding the attempt to overtake Konoha, and is hereby sentenced to death." The trial droned on for numerous members of the clan. This was the 3rd day of sentencing. Each person had their own trial. Most were shorter than others, which lasted hours. With the evidence stacked against the clan members, there was no case of defense. Minato presided over the trials but otherwise didn't say much other than presenting the charges and punishments. Days had passed and many more would pass before this whole fiasco would be over. So far the ones that were being charged were the ones with evidence of direct involvement. It would take more time to finalize the other trials for those that might have had a hand or played a smaller role. Even those that knew of the coup but stayed complacent weren't spared. In the end, Minato knew most of the clan would either be executed or imprisoned for some time. Most transgressors were older males. The innocent consisted mainly of children and women. The famous clan, the co-founders of Konoha, would no longer ever hold its prestigious name anymore. The power and place of honor was stripped from them and the survivors would be left in shame. Minato observed the section that was reserved for first-come civilians and other spectators. The looks ranged from anger to disbelief. Konoha had lost one of its strongest clans to shame. He thought back to those late-night secret meetings when one of the options was to secretly eliminate the entire clan to avoid this issue of public humiliation and paperwork. The suggestion had come from an older member, Danza to be specific. Minato was waiting for that bastard to keel over in his day-to-day dealings, but so far it hadn't happened. The fact that the old man didn't just retire like Hamura or Kohara pissed him off to no end, but he had to deal with him. Danza had wanted to annihilate the clan. The upside to that meant the clan would die with honor. But what was honor to a dead clan than to the village? To him as the Hokage to even allow for such an action was unthinkable. Why lie to his people? They deserved to know the truth. Unfortunately, he knew all too well some leaders who would keep their policies and dealings secret from their people. He looked at the next Uchiha up for judgment, and his gut clenched when he saw that it was another teenager. According to the file that he had read and pretty much memorized, the boy was 2 marriages removed from Obito, a cousin who was only 16 years old. The boy stood before the judgment panel with his head held down. He, along with those standing just behind the side doors, had heard the previous sentence to Shursui. No doubt the boy knew what he faced since he had been quite active in the coup in his eagerness to impress his father, for those who had developed a Sharingan had their blood limits sealed. The seal had been designed by the clan itself for detaining their own members. Minato had made some minor improvements on the design. This boy didn't have a seal though, yet he wore the chakra binding seals like all the others. The lack of the prize that would explain why he had been trying to please his father. Minato let out a quiet sigh. He did his best to hide it. This whole thing weighed heavily on his heart. There really was no way around it though. And just like he hadn't been able to avoid this, there was still the issue of Sasuke and Naruto. Ever since that day of Naruto's kidnapping, more questions had been raised about the mystery of the two boys. The way Kyuubi had acted, what it had said, it made no sense at all. The way things really were? What the hell did it mean? How did it know the name of a 7-year-old? After the incident, Sasuke had woken up screaming and hysterical. His words matched up with what he had been screaming at Itachi the moment their father died. The older Uchiha had been confused by the accusation, and just more than a little hurt, since it had been him who had taken the mission as a double agent for the fall of the clan. Minato had assured him that he would get to the bottom of it. Sasuke had been sedated, but the second time he came around it was obvious the boy had withdrawn from everyone. Minato didn't blame him. He had witnessed the killing of his father in such a gruesome way. He wasn't sure if the boy would recover mentally. Naruto had been pretty much the same way. His injuries healed up shortly after, and even his broken bones had been set, and the boy was already sitting up in bed. But that was the extent of his movements. The boy had been extremely quiet. The haunted look in his eyes led his concerned guardian to believe that he hadn't been exactly oblivious when the fox had taken over. Minato had tried to engage him in conversation and comfort him, but Naruto had merely asked if Sasuke was around. He had answered that Sasuke was in the next room. That had been the end of any real interaction between them. It killed him to see his little boy so withdrawn and damaged. Never before had he ever seen Naruto like this. In the past, attempts by villagers to beat the boy hadn't ever brought him down to this level before. It angered him. He despised the fox demon, but he hated himself for not being able to do anything, for not knowing what to do. Despite the story he had fed the council about Naruto's seal, he knew that the level of control wasn't supposed to be anywhere near this strong, if at all. Part of the seal would have initially suppressed the demon enough so that it wouldn't be conscious for years to come. His seal had been meant so that the fox would have been awakened not because it wanted to but by Naruto calling it forth. So how come the fox had taken over? Had Naruto somehow called it? That didn't seem plausible, but until he questioned him he wouldn't know for sure. Speaking of questioning his boy, he had to do that soon. Today's trials would end in a few more hours. It would be over when the list of names scheduled for today were done. So in the meantime he had to sit tight and bear with it. He gritted his teeth but compromised by sorting out just what questions he would ask those two boys. It really was time for this. He had put it off long enough. Now he just hoped that he wasn't too late, and that they would talk willingly. Konoha, as with any other ninja village, had their own methods of extracting information. Most could be considered brutal and painful, and he didn't even want to think about resorting to those, but they did have a few non-painful methods such as the Yamanaka clan mind-reading jutsus. Or there was another mind-reading jutsu, but that required the person in question to be dead. None of the methods were any that he wanted to deploy. He just hoped that they would cooperate and speak freely. One thing though that Minato had learned since he was young, hardly anything was ever free, especially information. It was going to be another long night. Naruto was sitting up in his bed. It was his usual room that he shared with Sasuke, but in this case there wasn't any Sasuke to share it with. According to his dad, Sasuke was in the next room over, but try as he might, he couldn't sense the other boy's chakra at all. He entertained the thought that maybe the walls were chakra-proof or something, or that his father had lied and Sasuke really wasn't there. Whatever the case, Naruto was concerned. He hadn't seen his best friend for a while now, and he was getting damned antsy. It didn't help that he was bored out of his mind. No one had told him that he couldn't leave the room, but they didn't actually give off the vibe that he could either. The boy stared hard at the door. The staring contest lasted only a minute before he shoved his cover aside and threw his legs over the side of the bed and sat up. It was his house, he could damn well do what he wanted. And he wanted to find Sasuke right now. After a few shaky steps from not having used his legs for a while, Naruto finally found his balance. He quickly made his way to the door before anyone could barge in and change his plans. The door to the room next to his was unlocked, and to prove his father right, Sasuke was in there. Naruto walked in slowly and closed the door behind him. Sasuke looked sick and extremely pale. He looked skinnier too. Around his eyes there were strange dark markings like a tattoo. Some sort of seal? No wonder he hadn't been able to sense anything. Perhaps his dad had sealed his chakra. The only reason that would make sense was if Sasuke had gone crazy when his father was killed. If so, Naruto didn't blame him, just like he didn't blame him for being such an ass all those years ago when all he wanted to do was kill his brother. Also, Sasuke might as well be dead by the way he looked and acted. The pale boy didn't even acknowledge him when he walked over to the bed. The boy was lying on the large bed, made larger by how small he was, with his eyes staring off into space. Naruto didn't think he was sleeping, but maybe he was wrong. Why else would he be so still? Sasuke? He called out quietly just in case he was sleeping. Then Naruto seemed to remember himself, and who he was talking to. Hey team! He finished crossing the distance to the bed with loud marching steps. At the bedside, Sasuke was still too far away, so he climbed onto the bed, disrupting the calm sea of creme sheets and cover. He leaned over the unresponsive boy with a frown. When a wave of his hand over the hazy gaze didn't even provoke a blink, he spoke up again, accompanying each of his words with a poke. "Hey team! What's the matter? Go away," the pale boy mumbled so lightly Naruto almost didn't hear him. Nonetheless, it was a response, but to keep him talking he pretended that he didn't hear him. "What? What did you say?" Naruto proceeded to lean closer to the other boy. Slightly irritated by the blonde, Sasuke shifted his gaze to Naruto. "Don't yell in my face, dope," he paired his request with a glare. Naruto smiled, finally, a proper response from the boy. Smiling, Naruto continued to stare down at Sasuke with no intention to leave. He had managed to get a reaction, but he knew he needed to annoy him more if he was going to get anywhere. That was just the way Sasuke functioned. He knew just what the other boy liked and didn't like, and what Sasuke hated almost as much as incessant jabbering was pointless staring which he just couldn't ignore. Unwilling to be the first to look away, Sasuke lasted all of 2 minutes before he snapped. "What? Victory, you look like shit," he blurted out. Hell, that wasn't what he was planning on saying, but his tongue managed to beat his brain in the race to say something once again. Sasuke wasn't amused. He didn't even deign to answer that comment. Naruto sobered up and his eyes grew solemn. Sasuke processed the 180-degree turn in personality but stayed silent as he waited for Naruto to say what he came to say. "I'm sorry," he started but looked away before continuing. "I tried to stop it. I don't know what's going on, but I'm going to stop it." He looked back at Sasuke briefly before he leaned forward and pressed his forehead to the other boys in an unprecedented move. The contact was over almost before it began, but the barest of touch was felt by both boys. Naruto pulled back and some understanding passed between them like it always did, but he had been expecting more confusion from the bedridden boy. He didn't think too much of it though when he jumped off the bed and let himself out of the room and made his way down to the kitchen for some food, preferably ramen. Sasuke was left to think of what just happened. Naruto, the unique, one-of-a-kind blonde idiot, had managed to somehow get past his defenses of icy aloofness with his annoying ways. And what was worse, or better, Sasuke didn't know anymore. He couldn't bring himself to care at the moment. He didn't care about a lot at all. When he had seen his father's death, it had been like the massacre all over again. He had gotten his family back only to lose them again. Granted, he hadn't seen them in a year and they weren't exactly on genial terms, but at least they were alive. Now though, his father was dead, he wasn't sure where Itachi and mother were, if she was alive or dead. In a sense, he was alone again. His father's death reminded him so clearly of why he had outgrown bonds in his last life. It was alarming easy to fall back into that attitude of avenger, and not give a damn about anyone but getting stronger. Yet here Itachi wasn't the villain. He never was in the first place. Sasuke still wasn't sure if he had been there when their father died, or if he had merely been part of a hallucination brought about by his overloaded mind. It was hard to think now that he had been cruelly reminded that he wasn't a 7-year-old kid but on the verge of manhood. His life from before intermingled and blended so well with the last year that thinking in terms of one or the other was impossible, yet thinking with both mindsets was even harder. He couldn't just ignore his past experiences, but the different factors in this life couldn't be disregarded either. But they didn't mix well at all. The only constant was Naruto. Only the blonde seemed to be never changing and forever by his side. He promptly shoved the thought that he had almost changed that twice in his short lifespan. That was a matter that would be put to the knife and examined another time. Maybe never if he had any say at all. Thinking of Naruto brought the blonde's parting words back to mind. He had apologized. Never in their dynamic relationship of enemies turned rival turned friends and back to enemies did they ever apologize to each other. It was a given, like the sky was naturally blue and the grass was born to be green, that every action seemed to be forgiven as soon as it was made. That meant that he wasn't apologizing for his actions but something else. I couldn't stop it. He must have been talking about the fox demon. Had he been aware the entire time? Sasuke recalled his fight with Naruto at the Valley of the End. It wasn't one of his best memories, but he clearly recalled with the photographic memory of the Sharingan that Naruto hadn't been overtaken by the fox. Naruto was in control then. In comparison, this time it had been all Kyuubi. From the moment those eyes opened that night, Sasuke could tell that Naruto wasn't in control. That issue of the blame of his father's death was something that he had no doubt about. So his vengeance was with the demon. Yet he had learned in his brief interactions with Akatsuki that extracting the demon killed the host. If the host died while the demon was inside, the demon would die as well. It would certainly satisfy him if that damned fox died, but that meant he would truly be alone because there was no way to kill the thing without killing Naruto too. Despite his mind's instinctive need to retreat back to his previous mindset, he had already established sometime in this past year that Naruto was someone that he was going to keep alive. He had never really been able to kill him anyway, even when given the chance. But there was that encounter after 3 years. In truth, during those years he had been conditioning himself to forget the blonde. It was surprisingly easy, but he refused to let that disturb him. There were plenty of things to distract him from it. Training, avoiding unnecessary contact with anything moving or non-moving, and other unpleasant things. So when he saw Naruto, The conditioning had dulled his mind to his friend-turned-enemy's presence, and for a moment, he actually thought that he could do it, kill Naruto. Thinking back on that, he was glad that the encounter was short-lived, or else in his developed apathy he might have actually tried. Sasuke's thoughts ended there, at least for that issue. He still couldn't bring himself to think about that last fight without something inside of him hurting. His eyes wandered the room. All this thinking was giving him a headache. Perhaps it was time to actually sleep. But as he settled his mind to try and sleep, the door opened once more to reveal none other than an older vision of Naruto. This is how Naruto's going to look like when he's older. That thought was promptly strangled since it held a please note that he wasn't willing to look into. He must be past exhaustion for his brain to muse so randomly. "You're up, Sasuke," the fourth spoke as he entered the room, followed by Obito. Those two hardly were ever apart. Where one was, the other was sure to follow if they weren't there already. He regarded the man coolly but remained silent. He knew that this was coming, but for some reason being stared down at by the yondaime wasn't as easy as he thought it would be. It was like being scolded by a father for doing something bad. Sasuke once again felt how easy it was to fall back into old habits. "I have some questions for you and I'd like your complete honesty, please," the blonde started off as soon as Obito shut the door. It took way too long for ramen to cook in his opinion. The thing said instant ramen, so why the hell did it take 3 minutes? He half-pranced around the kitchen agitatedly, even though his gaze never left the cup of slowly softening noodles. There hadn't been anyone in the house as far as he knew. Then again, he didn't check his father's room. To his way of thinking, he was going to avoid his father at all costs until he figured out how to keep the stupid fox from taking over. So far the only thing he could think of was to ask for help while he avoided his dad. He didn't know anything about seals and all that stuff. A few people came to mind when he thought about it. First of all, there was the pervy sage, but he wasn't even supposed to meet him until he was 12. His problem couldn't wait that long, and he didn't know if the Sannin was in Konoha. The same went with the old hag. He wouldn't see her too until later. His father could probably handle the seal since he made it, and all but that was the last person he wanted to be in contact with. Kyuubi. The other person was, well, he wasn't an option anymore with anything. His mood slightly drooped at the thought that he could no longer ask Kakashi for anything. The man hadn't been much of a teacher at first, but he was there, albeit late and lazy. Thinking of the man, he realized he hadn't gone to the memorial stone like he wanted to. Suddenly he decided that he would do that. His case of nostalgia was strong. He had been so focused on Sasuke and the thought that they were finally together that he had forgotten old friends and ties. It wasn't that Sasuke wasn't important, but so was everybody else too. It was different here. Some people were here and others weren't. The feeling of his former teen self warred with his newer child self, and he didn't like feeling so torn. If there was one thing that he hated, it was indecision. Naruto Uzumaki didn't ever let something as silly as indecision stop him. He was going to be the Hokage. He didn't think his father suffered from that problem, so he wouldn't either. As set as his mind was to wander over to the stone, he couldn't leave without eating his ramen first. It was so ingrained that he didn't even have to remind himself that his ramen was waiting patiently for him now to be consumed. Several breaths later, he was on his way. It didn't take him long to reach the place. Kakashi was always there, and in their futile attempts to see the face underneath the mask, they had come here often to spy on him. Once again he stood before the stone, and his eyes immediately went to the spot where his former teacher's name resided. He wasn't quite sure what to do now. He had never seen or heard Kakashi talking to the stone, so words seemed unnatural. Obito had touched the stone though, lovingly, as if he could touch Kakashi himself. Taking a shaking hand, he decided to go by example. After all, Obito was fast taking over a spot in his life similar to the white-haired man. He would never be Kakashi, but he was another male figure that was much appreciated. His finger brushed the engraving hesitantly, and when no lightning struck him on the spot, he passed his finger back over it once more, this time more firmly. And just like that, he felt himself being drawn into his past. It was weird thinking like that. Would it be the future or the past, since this is my past? The thought was confusing, so he let it slide. He'd ask someone later, like Shikamaru, when he got to know him again. Kakashi wasn't here, and neither was the old man who was like a father to him when he was younger. With no one really right now that he could turn to besides Sasuke, he felt quite alone. Just like when he was younger, the other younger him, he couldn't remember a time when he hadn't been able to run to the old man. Iruka was awesome, but he shot down the thought because he knew that until he proved himself, even Iruka hadn't cared much for him. That thought led to another and another with a separate person each time. It was depressing, and the longer he stood there, the more abandoned he felt. Stupid Sasuke, if it weren't for him, this wouldn't have happened. Whatever had happened when they slammed into each other had brought him here to this Konoha where things weren't the same, but still everything was going wrong. Well, he couldn't say everything. His father was alive, and so was Obito. Kakashi might not be alive, but he had saved his teammate, and Obito lived because of him. He was glad he got a chance to meet someone from Kakashi's past. And then there was Sasuke. There was always Sasuke, except this time he hadn't gone all moody and avenger on anyone yet. And he was nice to him for the most part. He was still a bastard, but there had been times when he had caught Sasuke staring at him strangely. But it wasn't a weird strange, and he didn't mind it. He just didn't know what it was. Really, the only connection he had to his past, or future, was Sasuke. Even with some differences, he somehow felt right. It was almost like they were the same person. He even went as far as calling him Dobe even though they hadn't gone to the academy yet. Wait a minute! Sasuke didn't call him that until after a year when he went all huffy and bastardy on everyone. Come to think of it, Sasuke never really liked him at all. He didn't show it if he did. This thought led to more thoughts on how Sasuke acted very much like the old one, the real one back when they were genin. He had taken it for granted how similar they were. He had actually been comforted by that without even realizing why he had been so comfortable with Sasuke. He was stunned. The possibility that Sasuke really was Sasuke made his mind draw a blank. It took the span of a few silent moments before his brain caught up to the realization. Team! Why didn't he tell me? Outraged that the other boy had kept silent about his true self, and letting him think he was alone in this Konoha was unforgivable. At least until after he beat the crap out of him. The only thoughts running through his mind centered on maiming the bastard somehow. Anything else could come later. He wasn't going to admit just yet how relieved he felt when he made the connection. He wasn't alone after all. He entered his home and marched straight up the stairs. In his single-mindedness, he didn't catch the subtle sign that his father was home, nor did he pay attention to the ANBU presence around the manor. To him, they were always around for one reason or another. This time it wasn't any different. At Sasuke's door, he turned the knob only to find it locked. Annoyed that Sasuke would dare to lock him out, he drew his foot up and with a little boost of chakra, sent the door flying open with a bang. Team! Why didn't you tell me? He shouted at the 3 occupants in the room who had turned to him with wide eyes. The surprise from everyone, including himself, made him falter. Immediately he regretted not paying attention as his father was now staring at him with a frown. Great, now he's gonna be suspicious. Is this a bad time? He stammered out even as he started inching his way to the left. In 2 seconds he would be out the main door. In fact, he didn't even give anyone a chance to answer, as he turned and darted away before someone could say something. Naruto. He stopped dead at the authoritative voice with a cringe but didn't turn around just yet. That someone being his father had spoken, he couldn't just ignore him. Instead he called over his shoulder in a small voice, "Yeah?" Hell, that sounded pathetic even to his ears. "Why don't you join us?" Minato spoke evenly. He mentally swore at everyone in his head but he didn't try to escape. His father would catch him if he so much as stepped away from the door any more than he already had. From the way his dad sounded, it looked like Sasuke was in trouble, which meant that he was in trouble as well, if not more so for just kicking in the door like that. Naruto. He was jarred out of his thoughts and realized pissing his dad off at the moment wasn't a good idea. Reluctantly he dragged his feet loudly across the hallway floor until he stood once more in the doorway of Sasuke's room. He looked guiltily at Obito and his father. He couldn't yet bring his eyes to look at Sasuke after his outburst. "Come inside and close the door," his father coaxed patiently as he tried to draw his suddenly skittish son into the room. He slowly complied, but every time he tried to shut the door it swung open again. The other 3 watched him silently, each thinking their own thoughts as he tried again and again. On the 5th try Minato sighed and spoke up, "That's enough. I don't think the door is going to close anymore, Naruto. Why don't we go into my office?" He gave his father a sheepish chuckle and absently scratched the back of his head. He followed Obito, while he studiously avoided Sasuke's insistent stare. When the office door was closed and locked by none other than the 4th, he knew his well-thought-out plan of avoidance was screwed. A really bad feeling swelled in his gut when his father told Sasuke and him to sit down while they remained standing. His dad approached him with an inked brush and began drawing something on his arm. It looked like the same thing that had been on Sasuke's arm. When his father was done, he held a hand over it. It glowed for a moment as the seal was activated and his arm tingled. It stayed tingly for a few more seconds before it faded. "Now, why don't we get started?" Minato spoke up, but there was no cheer in his voice. He regarded the 2 boys closely. Sasuke was silent and expressionless, but Naruto, on the other hand, was a bundle of twitching nerves. It wasn't a hard guess who would crack first. Get what started?" Naruto stammered out as he rocked back and forth in his chair and his feet swung erratically in the high chair. The boy hadn't even looked at Sasuke yet. "Questioning you two," Obito said ominously as he stepped forward toward them. "We've noticed several things that don't quite add up when you do the math." Naruto stopped his fidgeting immediately at his words and Sasuke grew tense. It was then that Minato silently observed the 2 boys glance discreetly at each other. Whatever communication they had just happened in that split second before they both looked back to Obito. The Hatake carried on as if he hadn't seen the look. "Sasuke, according to your brother, you haven't been allowed to train yet, but on several accounts were seen displaying a skill level of a genin, or even more. You used chakra, showed fighting techniques never taught by the clan or the academy. You knew about the exact tunnel that Fugaku had taken Naruto even when Itachi didn't know. You were imprisoned by the clan briefly over a year ago, and it was because Mikoto truly believes that you're her son that she snuck you out. Apparently they must have found something, otherwise you wouldn't have been kept that long. As far as anyone knows, you would have stayed there and rotted. What did they find out about you?" Obito asked as he gauged the boy's reaction to everything he had said. Sasuke had kept his stare level throughout the entire time. He didn't say anything for a moment until he looked over at Naruto. The blonde returned his stare but didn't say anything. He seemed to make up his mind and looked back at Obito and Minato. I don't know what I told them. They must have drugged me, he started slightly thoughtful. He hadn't even thought about that. What had they discovered? Did they know Itachi was a spy? Is that why everything went wrong? Where did Madara fit in? There was too much that he didn't know about to make any assumptions. Mikoto swears that you're her son, yet we have reason to believe otherwise, Minato spoke up to prompt the boy, to keep him talking. He could only imagine what the Uchihas had used to get the boy to talk and not remember anything. Is she okay? My mother? The pale boy asked. Obito debated if he should hold that knowledge over the boy's head but decided against it. He had just lost his father too. That display of grief had been quite convincing. They had to know what was going on though. She's fine, you might even get to see her if you cooperate with us, he replied. Sasuke seemed to breathe a sigh of relief and he nodded softly. Team. You're not supposed to say anything. Naruto panicked. I thought we had an agreement with the whole eye thing. Sasuke glared at him. Minato eyed his boy. He didn't think he was wrong that Naruto would spill easily. I don't know what you're talking about. Sasuke scoffed at the other boy who fumed at the dismissive words and tone. Just as Naruto was about to lunge at the still-sitting boy, Minato caught him by the back of his jacket and plopped him back down in his chair. With the stern sound of his name he neutralized the squirming blonde. Who are you? Obito prodded once the fuming blonde had been shushed by his father. Uchiha Sasuke, the last surviving Uchiha of Konoha. He held his head high and kept his gaze even with the two adults. Before they could ask just what he meant and before Naruto could protest, he added, of my time. His declaration was met with silence. Naruto gaped at him and even he seemed surprised, but Minato watched him closely and saw a bit of relief in those blue eyes as well. The blonde boy moved his mouth as if to speak but once more Sasuke beat him to it. Trust me, Naruto. The firm conviction in his voice stilled the blonde boy. The staring contest lasted only seconds before Naruto crossed his arms over his chest in a pout. He gave in to Sasuke. Fine, but don't you dare lie to make yourself look better. He sulked and slouched down in his chair with a huff. Minato and Obito observed the interaction interestedly. It seemed they were both in on it, whatever it was. It was his Naruto from before, the one that he had grown up with during their genin time, and the one who had stuck with him for years afterward. The relief he felt at the moment was incomprehensible. He hadn't killed him. Naruto was alive and had been with him the entire time. From his reaction, he was pretty sure Naruto hadn't been aware that he was here as well until now. Explain. The fourth's curt order drew his attention from the sulking blonde boy. He turned back to Naruto's father. He had had his suspicions about Naruto, and he would have bet his life on it, but hearing the blonde's last words truly confirmed it. The only thing to do now was keep the idiot alive, and to do so, he would need all the help he could get. Help in this case was none other than the legendary fourth. He had no doubt the man loved Naruto, and would stop at nothing to keep him safe. Over a year ago, when I woke up and found myself in my old room with my mother standing before me, I couldn't believe it. Thinking it was a genjutsu, I didn't believe her or my father or Itachi. My family was dead, by Itachi's hand and by mine. Minato cocked his head, no doubt thinking about those cryptic words. Perhaps the man was already putting things together. He didn't spend too much time thinking about that. He'd find out anyway. The last thing I remembered before waking up that day was setting out to destroy Konoha. He looked at Naruto. Naruto was there and we fought. In the heat of the fight I don't remember what happened around us, but as a last attempt we charged each other with Chidori and Rasengan. Everything went black after that. When the boy mentioned Chidori and Rasengan, both adults' expressions showed surprise. No one knew those attacks except himself and Obito. How could these two boys use them? No one knows about those jutsus except us. Obito voiced his own thought. Sasuke appeared unperturbed and he spoke. Kakashi created it, and you taught Jiraiya? Naruto added as he looked at his father's astonished face. Both adults were left gaping. It didn't last long though before anger coursed through him at the mention of his dead student. How dare you talk about Kakashi? You weren't even alive! He grounded out in a low dangerous tone as he turned his anger onto the pale boy. The boy shrank back a bit but held his ground. Weren't you listening? Sasuke asked, slightly exasperated despite his wariness at the show of anger. The boy paused for a moment, as if he wanted to say something else but changed his mind. No doubt the kid was re-evaluating his tone of voice. Look, when I said of our time, I meant it. Naruto and I aren't 6-year-olds. We've been around all this for almost 16 years now. We've gone to the academy and graduated. Kakashi was our jounin guide, he explained. Yeah, and since Kakashi-sensei was training Sasuke, bastard Jiraiya trained me and taught me Rasengan. Naruto joined in once more. He seemed more enthusiastic about telling his story now that Sasuke had broken the ice. Jiraiya taught him my move? He was once again speechless. Why would his teacher teach Naruto his signature attack? It didn't make any sense. Jiraiya? He asked just to be sure, but his stomach was sinking. Naruto nodded and proceeded to spout things about the Sannin that he couldn't dispute. He listened and vaguely registered the name Gamabunta. His little boy had summoned the great frog boss himself? Jiraiya let him sign the contract? Where the hell was I? He demanded, cutting Naruto off. Immediately he knew something was wrong when the boy went silent and wouldn't look at him. Naruto? He couldn't bear it. He took a step toward his son. His son shrugged and mumbled under his breath. What? He prodded when he couldn't understand a thing the boy said. You're dead, he said softly. You sacrificed your life to seal Kyuubi. To say that he was shocked was an understatement. And here he thought that he wouldn't be surprised anymore once the idea of these two boys being from another time clicked in his mind. He went back to that day when he saw Naruto barge into his office. He had passed the strange behavior off, but examining the event now it made sense. You're dead. The shock and disbelief that he hadn't picked up on slammed into him now. His mouth couldn't form the apology on the tip of his tongue. The thought that Naruto had been alone tore at him. His heart broke at the way his kid was trying to shrug it off. It's okay, the old man the third was there for the most part. No one told me about you until Jiraiya decided to tell me. How you gave your life to save the village and that my mother, Kushina, died giving birth to me. I always thought that I was some nameless kid that no one wanted. Naruto's voice had thickened with each word, but everyone could see that he was trying hard to hide it. It was the name that struck him this time. Obito inhaled sharply and glanced at his teacher. Kushina was Naruto's mother? The revelation was beyond words. Minato couldn't take it anymore. He had placed the seals onto the two boys thinking that the truth that the seals would reveal would enlighten him as to what the hell was going on, but now he wasn't so sure if he could take it. His son was from another time and was fighting against his best friend. He was supposedly dead and Jiraiya had to teach him the things that he was looking forward to teaching, and Kushina was Naruto's mother? That thought alone kept repeating itself in his head, and it was impossible, yet he was dead according to his son. Oh God, his son! His biological son, not just in name but in blood as well. Kushina. Naruto. He couldn't take it anymore. He needed to be alone to sort his thoughts and emotions out. Stay with them, he rasped out to Obito. Then he was gone with his Hiraishin, leaving behind two confused boys and a torn student. Minato stood at the edge of the cool spring that he had come to call his secret hiding place when he wanted time to himself to think. He had come here when Sarutobi had spoken to him about nominating him for Hokage. He had also come here when he had cut down on all the options of defeating the fox demon, and was left with his last plan of action. The fox had been looming in the distance for days with its red chakra creating a red haze that simulated a sunset that never went away. As the fox had come closer and closer, lives had been lost trying to delay the demon from reaching the village, but it had all been in vain. He had left the clearing with resolute conviction about what he was going to do, yet when he had arrived back into the tower, the third and Jiraiya had told him otherwise. Minato let out a sigh and he plopped down onto his butt and fell onto his back with his arms thrown wide. He never thought that if he had gone through with his original plan that he would perhaps regret anything. But seeing his son, his real son, talk about his life as if he hadn't ever been a part of it hurt him deeply. To think that had this not happened, he would have never known that Naruto was his child. And Kushina? She was Naruto's mother? He couldn't believe it. How could he not have known? Thinking back on them, it had never occurred to him that she might have been pregnant. There was just so much going on. When she had finally confronted him that day, he had snapped, and so had she. He hated this memory but looked back anyway to see if he had missed any telltale sign. Minato? Kushina yelled through the door to his home office. He hadn't seen her in over a week since they last fought. Kakashi had been distant with him, and he hadn't seen Obito lately either. Minato was never around, and if he wasn't at the office then he was locked up in his room. Kushina just couldn't take it anymore. He knew she was angry at him for not making a little time from her. She knew he had duties and there was so much crap going on, but he couldn't make time for her with how stressed out he was. The laughing and easygoing man Kushina fallen in love with had turned into a serious grim man that she didn't recognize or even like. It didn't help that her mood swings had earned her probation from missions for the time being. She had attacked an annoying client and a teammate as well. She hadn't been sent on a mission in over a week. Hence the reason that they had fought last time was when he reprimanded her on her conduct. He hadn't answered her call. She knew he most likely didn't want to talk about anything, nor did he have time. With all the shit going on since he became Hokage, it was hard to make time for her or anything else. She was being unreasonable. She was being selfish. The door opened anyway and she came in. He didn't bother looking at her or acknowledging her. He could feel the angry thuds of her footsteps as she marched toward him. Small hands slammed down onto his desk and dislodged several scrolls and an empty glass that clattered to the floor. Only at the sound of breaking glass did he finally look up with an annoyed scowl. What? He snapped. He didn't have time for her temper tantrums, and he sure as hell wasn't in the mood to be patient with whatever ordeal she had gotten into this time. Just because he was the Hokage didn't mean he could keep bailing her out of things. She was lucky she was just on probation for pulling that stunt last week. Any other person and they'd have been arrested and detained until they were deemed fit to return to duty. Don't you want me, ass face? She shouted at him, I just wanted to see you. You've been avoiding me. She returned his glare and pointed an accusing finger at him. He didn't relent. I don't have time for you. Can't you see that I'm busy? He held on to his temper. These days his fuse was short, especially with the Uchiha clan dodging his every decision and driving him to wanting to strangle someone. You're always busy. Can't you just take a day off? An hour? She pressed but held back the tears and hurt that threatened to show at the callousness of his words. How could he say that to her? He had promised her that he always had time for her back when they first met. Why was she being so stupid? She never cried, yet she had cried more times these past few days than she ever had in her life. Just because I'm Hokage doesn't mean I get to do whatever I want, Kushina. His patience was running thin. His words made it worse as her anger dropped to an expression of hurt. He saw the tears gather in her eyes and he hurt, but standing firm in his choice he didn't soften up and give in. She had to understand his point of view, and if he didn't stand firm then she never would. That's just an excuse, she yelled as her anger resurfaced. After all, she wouldn't cry in front of him, not if he was going to be a jerk. Minato held on to the last of his patience. What do you want? He grounded out. Those words were the final straw, it seemed, for her. She snapped and shouted at him, I want you. Damn it, Minato, you have me. No, I don't. The fucking village does. You don't spend time with me. You're always doing stuff that you won't tell me about. For all I know, you could be screwing your secretary with as much time as you spend with her. Is this what this is about? You think I'm cheating on you? No, then what? He didn't bother to lower his voice as he lost the last of his patience. It made him mad that she didn't trust him, and for a spontaneous burst he wanted to hurt her. What about you? How do I know you're not whoring yourself out? He bit out. Kushina's eyes widened in surprise and she sputtered, but he continued, You think I don't know about Haruo? Why you punched him? You think he was sent flying by her punch? His chair was overturned and more papers and scrolls went flying. Several items fell off the shelf behind him where he has crashed. You son of a bitch! She roared at him. Don't you ever fucking talk to me like that. You wouldn't know anything since you're never around. She slammed a chakra-laden fist onto his desk and smashed the wood. With an angry heave she lifted the desk and shoved it over. Fine. You don't have time for me. Don't worry, I won't ever bother you again. She shouted and slammed out of the room. Minato rubbed his eyes and groaned. She had been moody and more angry than usual. There had been more hurtful words thrown around without care, but in the heat of the moment, he had forgotten some of what he or she had said. He had snapped at her and accused her of sleeping with her teammate. It had turned out that the bastard had tried to force himself on her. He had found out months later from gossip. Ironically enough, he had made time to find the bastard and lay a good one on him. That disgrace would never be a ninja again, but it had been too late. He hadn't seen her since she stormed out of his house that day. With the damned clan rising up against him, he had been too distracted to pay much attention. Then there was that whole shit with Orochimaru and Kakashi as well. The boy had been distant, and despite his tries to talk to the boy, the teen still remained aloof. It wasn't until it was almost too late that he had found out what had been going on. Familiar rage welled up inside him, but he shoved it away. He didn't have time for that particular memory. Orochimaru had paid for what he did with his life, but every now and then he wished he could summon that bastard back and kill him all over again. His mood completely dropped at the thought that he hadn't saved Kakashi. Maybe if he hadn't been so caught up in everything. If only he had met up with Kakashi like he said he would. So many different scenarios came to mind, but in the end he couldn't change what had happened. His regrets were so strong, he fought the urge to just curl up and cry. If only he had gone after Kushina right away. If not right away, then at least within the next day or two. If only he hadn't stayed late at the office to argue with Fugaku and met up with Kakashi instead. Naruto's words came back to him. Kakashi was alive in the other world that his son apparently came from. They hadn't mentioned Obito, and the Hatake never mentioned that either boy knew who he was. Naruto also said that the third was alive. So a life for a life then? His mind tried to wrap around the logic of it all, but he found it impossible. Just what did one do when there were people from another time? And not just anyone, his son and his son's best friend. He hadn't stayed long enough to find out why the two were fighting. Now the unanswered questions gnawed at him. He could deal with his regrets later. At the moment he needed to finish interrogating the two boys to see just what they knew. Then maybe, just maybe, he would know what to do about all of this. Left alone with Naruto and Sasuke, who weren't really Naruto and Sasuke yet they were, Obito wasn't quite sure what to do. He could keep questioning them, but they'd have to do it all over again anyway with Minato. He had the feeling Minato would be back anyway, and he'd want more answers. But for now, he had a little bit of curiosity that he needed to satisfy. So far either boy had mentioned him at all. Hell, Sasuke didn't even know who he was. He had said that he was the last Uchiha. There was a whole clan of living, breathing jerks, so how could he be the last? Unless when he said that Itachi had killed his family, had he meant the entire clan? That was impossible. He had to admit the kid was damn good, but to take out the entire clan? That was unheard of. No way, Obito didn't believe it, couldn't believe it. He had to know that much at least. He eyed the pale boy who was currently in a staring contest with Naruto. The two seemed to be communicating with their eyes again, but he couldn't be sure since last time it hadn't worked as well as Naruto thought it did. Sasuke, he started to get the boy's attention. When you said that Itachi and you, he hesitated on that part, killed your family, did you mean just your parents? Sasuke broke the staring contest to gaze upon his cousin. His eyes were tired and way too old. How could he not have seen through these two boys before? Itachi killed the entire clan, leaving me alive, the boy said in a dead voice, and he added for clarification, I killed Itachi. Obito was in shock. So his thought had been correct then. That's impossible. He denied the claim, yet how those eyes could lie he wasn't sure. Sasuke merely shrugged and said he had help from someone. Obito perked up at this tidbit of information, as did Naruto. The blonde boy raised a brow and opened his mouth to speak, but Sasuke beat him to it. I'd rather say this only once, he made his case. Obito agreed. This was a tough subject, so he let the boy remain silent. He decided to ask the other question on his mind. So how come you guys don't know me? Surely Sasuke, you would have seen me at one point or another before Itachi, you know, he pressed. Sasuke reacted with a shrug. I don't recall ever meeting anyone like you, nor did I ever hear anything about someone named Obito. His cold words deflated the pale man's hopes. So he turned to Naruto, who only shook his head in the negative. Kakashi never mentioned anything about his original team, Naruto confirmed. Obito's hope plummeted once more. The chance that he had been alive at all in their world was fast receding. Naruto, blunt as ever, jumped up as an idea hit him. Hey! I don't even know why I didn't think of it before, he exclaimed excitedly. Sasuke merely raised a brow and asked, what dope? Shut it, team! I bet you'll be jealous that you didn't think of this first. He taunted and proceeded to dance around in victory. Obito sighed. The boy was so easily distracted. What is it? He asked the blonde. Naruto stopped dancing and glanced at him with a confused expression. What did you come up with? Sasuke asked, exasperated. Oh, he chuckled as he forgot that he hadn't told them yet. Well, you know Kakashi-sensei has the Sharingan thingy. And since Obito was his teammate, do you think that's how he got it? Sasuke's brows furrowed in thought, and he nodded slightly. Yeah, I think so, he said slowly as he eyed Obito. Obito, however, was confused at the conversation. What Sharingan? He'd never heard anyone call it a thingy before either. And Kakashi wasn't an Uchiha. He was a Hotaki, a clan of another completely different bloodline limit. What? He asked. What are you guys talking about? To enlighten the confused man, Sasuke took it upon himself to explain. Kakashi has a Sharingan in his left eye. It's not his, not originally anyway. What Naruto is saying is that maybe you might have given the Sharingan to Kakashi. His mind was reeling. I gave him my Sharingan? The thought was hard to process. Why the hell would he do that? Not unless he had died, but then his clan would have taken care of his body so that the bloodline limit wouldn't fall into enemy hands. Not that Kakashi was anywhere close to being the enemy. And thinking about it, he'd rather Kakashi have it than it going back to the damned clan anyway. Do you know why? He asked in hopes that they would know. Both boys shook their heads, and he knew, for sure, the only way he'd have given his Sharingan away was if he had died. So he really was dead then. No wonder the two brats didn't know who he was. Wow, that sucked. No wonder Minato had left. Knowing that he hadn't made it long enough to even meet the two boys left him stunned. To think that his counterpart never mind, he wouldn't think about it right now. He had so many questions. Minato needed to get his butt back now so that they could get all the details out of these boys. In the meantime, he had to keep an eye on them. God help him if anything happened. Last time he had been told to keep an eye on them, one had been kidnapped. That had not been good at all. He briefly toyed with the idea of activating Minato's three-pronged kunai but decided against it. He would come back when he was ready. It wouldn't do to summon him when he wasn't expecting it. Alright, let's begin. The man spoke, and he closed his eyes to begin the process of searching the dead's mind. The preparations had been long and hard, especially considering the state that the body was in. Whatever had gotten to the body sure as hell made a mess of it. His subordinates along with several medics had to piece the body back together. The most important part was reattaching the head properly back onto the body. With the Uchiha clan in shame, there were no restrictions with what they could do to the body. No one stood in the way. The only one who could was now the body that they were going to use. The Hokage had ordered Fugaku's body to be tested and his mind rated to find information. With all the mess going on, who knew what they would find in the man? Naruto wasn't sure what was taking his dad so long to get back, but Obito had ordered the two boys to get some sleep since it didn't look like the Hokage would be coming back tonight. He shuffled to the room that he shared with Sasuke. After climbing into his bed and staring at Sasuke as he got into his, Obito turned off the lights and closed the door. The two boys sat in the darkened silence for several minutes before Naruto whispered, "I'm glad you're here." His words were barely audible, but Sasuke heard them nonetheless. A couple seconds later, the pale boy returned a low grunt to acknowledge him. Content to take that as an affirmative that he felt the same way, Naruto hopped off his bed and made his way over to Sasuke. He shoved the other boy over and crawled into the bed. Sasuke didn't resist when shoved and even held the covers open for the blonde to scramble under. Safe and warm under the covers, Naruto turned to gaze at Sasuke, whose dark eyes returned the scrutiny. In the time that they had spent together, things had changed. Spending every available moment with each had made them even more dependent on the other's presence. It was the first time they had been alone together since the whole Kyuubi incident. That felt like ages ago to Naruto, and he wasn't even sure when it had happened, except that it changed a crap load of things. Here he thought that life was going good for once, but then things had to happen, and now he wasn't sure what to do. His thoughts were rambling and out of order, so to clear his mind a bit he decided he'd ask Sasuke. After all, they were in this together. "Hey, so what do you think is going to happen?" he asked. His best friend didn't answer for the longest time. Just when Naruto thought he wouldn't get a reply, Sasuke spoke. "I don't know. Too many different things have happened that we can't rely on our past to make decisions," he said in a hushed voice. Thinking that Obito might still be outside, Naruto kept his voice down too as he whispered a soft "yeah" in response. It hadn't been the answer that he was expecting, but as smart as Sasuke was sometimes, he didn't always know everything either. Naruto stayed silent for a while, but he didn't sleep. His mind had decided to stray from the issue of what to do and focus on the last thing that he remembered before waking up in the woods. In truth, in the heat of the moment, he couldn't remember much except for that last instance where his Rasengan collided with Sasuke's Chidori. The sounds of both jutsus had been deafening. The swooshing of his compressed chakra raged against the crackling of 1,000 birds until he hadn't been able to hear anything. He remembered seeing Sasuke, though, despite the intense light. The look of concentration on the other boy's face had been clear as day. He could still see it even now. The drawn hand that came forward at the last second to collide with his Rasengan was an overpowering sight. But in the end he had been overtaken not by the intimidating jutsu but the fact that history had repeated itself once more. The first time around he hadn't held back. He had promised Sakura that he would bring the bastard back even if he had to break all the bones in his body. No, there hadn't been any mercy then. Thinking on it now, he knew why he had dropped his arm just a fraction, enough to let the Chidori ram past and cut into him once more. He was tired of chasing Sasuke, tired of trying to beat sense into him when it hadn't worked in the first place. Did Sasuke not really want to belong to Konoha that badly? Had it been him? His resolve, his nindo, had faltered. These thoughts plagued him now as he laid there unable to find slumber in the comfort of Sasuke's presence. As if he could see the emotions on his face even in the dark, Sasuke nudged him and asked, "What?" Naruto hesitated. He had always wanted to know if avenging his family, if killing the rest of his family had been more important than enjoying what family he had left. He searched those dark eyes, and even in the limited light he could see patience as he waited for an answer. He speculated at how different Sasuke was now. Would Sasuke have been like this had Itachi never killed the clan? Of course he was still snobby and arrogant, but on top of that he had patience, and was more caring than the Sasuke of old ever could be. This life so far had shown that without the need for vengeance, Sasuke really wasn't too bad. So did it matter that he asked now when he could clearly see? Just thinking about how everything could have been, he started off slowly, and when Sasuke only kept staring at him with those same dark eyes he continued, "Back then if things had happened something like now." He finished his sentence knowing that although it didn't make sense, Sasuke would understand what he was saying. Without Itachi in the way taunting Sasuke's every move, would Sasuke never have left the village in the first place? Would you have returned? The words slipped out unexpectedly. He wasn't even sure why he asked. In the life of old, Sasuke had achieved his revenge, but still he refused to come home. What more was there? Sasuke didn't answer. There was a lot that Naruto didn't know about his precious village, things that just might shatter that unbreakable loyalty of his. What would his idiot think if he knew that the Konoha he loved had been built on blood and lies? It took a while before either boy could fall asleep. "Let us begin," spoke Fugaku as he sat in the seat of honor before the more prominent members of the proud Uchiha clan. The war was officially over, and thus began their plans. Like all other Uchihas, Fugaku believed that the clan was all-powerful and above all else, the most important. If it weren't for the clan, Konoha would not be the village it was. It had begun as far back as his forefathers. Ever since the Senju had defeated Madara, the clan had been placed in a humiliating second. Had it not been for the Nidame's attempt to mollify the disgraced clan with the position of the police department, there would have been no telling where they would be now. Perhaps they would have bided their time and rose to power once more. In the end, though, the clan head had made the decision to submit to the Hokage and bid its time. Now, Fugaku would bring Madara's actions to fruit. Their forefather had the right idea, but against Senju Hashirama the odds had not been in his favor. Today the Senju were a dying clan with no one significant left besides Tsunade of the Sannin. But for such an imposing woman, her current location was unknown as she had fled Konoha in grief and anger. Fugaku didn't expect any opposition from the last Senju. Not since the death of the White Fan could anyone stand up to the clan. The champion of Konoha was rivaled by no one. Even Jiraiya claimed to have lost to the Hatake, and with his son in shame there was no reason to worry about the Hatake clan at all. But frustratingly, where one man fell, another rose to take his place. Fugaku's blood boiled at the mere thought of the man. His pleasing looks and easy nature easily disguised the prodigy underneath. Fugaku would admit grudgingly that the man was good, too good as he stood in the way of the clan. Honored as the war hero throughout the entire war and feared by enemies all over, the man was the Hokage's favorite shinobi, Namikaze Minato, a man of no significant lineage or ties, a loser through the academy who Jiraiya saw fit to take under his wings, a man whose calligraphy was barely legible yet was infamous for his seals and original jutsus. Namikaze was a man to be reckoned with. He hated him. Fugaku stayed up on many nights plotting the downfall of the man. Rumors flew around fast. The third favored him as the next Hokage, and the villagers and ninja alike approved of their adored hero. He couldn't let the man become Hokage. With him in charge, his plans would be severely limited. He couldn't fight the man one-on-one either. Namikaze may not be Senju, but he might as well be. So began the reason for this clan meeting in the underground catacombs of the Uchiha compound. They were going to find a way to bring Namikaze down. "Wake up, Dobe," he shook the sleeping blonde who had curled up on his chest sometime during the night. His shaking only elicited a groan and a plea for a few more minutes. Sasuke carefully ran his hands through the golden locks, marveling at how soft yet anti-gravity they were. An almost tender look passed over his face as he contemplated the boy. Needless to say, he hadn't slept well as he pondered Naruto's words from last night. He knew Madara wanted the fox demon, although he didn't know why or cared. Naruto's father was still his best bet on how to keep Naruto safe. To do so, he would need to tell him about Madara and the Akatsuki. He'd need to tell them about the third and the elder's decision. But most of all, he needed to get Naruto off of him so that he could start training. Just the thought of his skinny arms and legs and low chakra level was enough for him to want to jump off the nearest cliff. It was like being a kid again, which he was, but he shouldn't be, but he was. Sasuke shook his head. Naruto was rubbing off on him. With that scary thought that he might actually start acting like his blonde idiot, he shoved the boy off of him. With a startled cry, Naruto landed on the ground in a panic state. "Naruto, shut up," he said to alleviate the blonde's confusion. Naruto looked up at Sasuke, who was glaring at him with wide eyes. His heart rate started to slow down, and a sour mood filled his face as he realized he wasn't being attacked but had been kicked out of bed instead. Stupid bastard. What the hell was that for? He shouted a second after he lunged at Sasuke. Before Sasuke could even comprehend that they were about to fight, his arms had already come up to defend against Naruto's attack. Moments later they were a tangle of feet and fists, as they rolled around the bed and soon onto the floor. The fight was instinctive despite how long they had gone without physically fighting. It came back to them as naturally as breathing. It was as if their bodies knew exactly what to do in relation to the other. Adrenaline pumped through their veins and their world narrowed in until nothing existed except each other. "What the hell?" The shout went unheeded as the two boys continued to fight. It wasn't until a pair of tan arms yanked the two apart that they snapped out of their fight. Breathing hard but feeling exhilarated, they calmed down almost as fast as they had gotten excited. Minato scowled at the two boys as he wondered just what the heck had gotten into them. Thinking about how they said they had fought last time, he had panicked that it was happening again. "Naruto! Sasuke! What the heck do you two think you're doing?" he demanded once more when the two boys remained silent. He gave them a shake for good measure. "Fighting," Naruto admitted sullenly as he avoided his dad's eyes. Sasuke looked away as well. Minato could do nothing, so he let them go, but not before imparting some commands. "Get dressed, we're leaving right after breakfast." He nudged the two boys toward their closet before he disappeared out the room. They looked at each other wondering where the heck they could be going. Not willing to upset his dad, Naruto silently went about getting ready. The two boys came down the stairs slowly, not quite sure what to expect. They found the fourth moving around the kitchen as he dished some eggs and rice onto a couple plates. Quietly, Naruto and Sasuke sat down and slowly began eating awkwardly. Never had they seen the carefree man so serious before, and they didn't know how to act. No words were exchanged during the terse meal, and soon they were escorted to the tower by the fourth. So far there hadn't been any sign of Obito. Sasuke wasn't sure if that was a good thing or not. As they made their way there, he noted how solemn and quiet the village appeared today. Granted, he hadn't left the manor since Kyuubi and Madara's attack, nor was he sure how much time had passed since then. A glance at Naruto confirmed that Naruto had picked up on the absence of life as well. Had this been how the village was back when Itachi murdered the clan? The tower came into view and his attention was directed to the higher level of security. Instead of the usual Chunin, there were Anbu in full view guarding the entrance.